stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
President Clements.
Here.
Vice President Benante.
Here.
Trustee Haldane.
Here.
Trustee Clements.
Here.
Trustee McNabb.
Here.
So I do not believe that we have any changes we want to make to the agenda, so can we approve the agenda?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agenda as written.
So
Yeah. So, I heard a motion and a second.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Usually I ask for them, but that's good. Got it. All right. So now time for some comments from me. The next Board of Education
Gotta
meeting.
vote on it.
Oh, sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those-
There you
It's
go.
been a while.
Your post nay. No, I was just so surprised. My cadence was broken.
Gotcha.
Thanks, John. The next Board of Education meeting will be held on March 5th, so that's actually a week from tonight, here in the middle school, high school library at 7 p.m. And I'd also like to remind everybody that we will be having both a budget vote and Board of Education trustee elections this May, and petitions are available in the district office or by contacting Megan Shields, district clerk, if you are interested in getting a petition and running for the board. If you are interested or even just have questions about running, please feel free to reach out to me or any other board member. We would be happy to answer any questions you have about running for the board. And so the annual district meeting and trustee election will be held on May 21st, 2024, and there will be two 3-year terms up for election for the school board. And I think the only other comments that I actually really want to make is, it feels like it was a long time ago, but on February 15th, John and I had the opportunity to visit the elementary school and to spend time in some classrooms. A total of 8 teachers ranging from kindergarten through 5th grade were gracious enough to allow us to go into their classrooms and spend some time, and it was really very gratifying to get to see the teachers and students working. And so we'll also, part of this is it coincides with Ms. Jamin's elementary school report, and which we'll be hearing later on tonight as our workshop topic. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Clements, and I'll echo your remarks. It was great to have both you and John visit our elementary school. Thank you, Ms. Jamin, for facilitating, and I know you've thank our teachers for hosting us as we came and got to see a range of opportunities that we offer our students at the elementary level. And I know we'll hear a bit about that in the coming moments. Just a couple of comments from me. I wanted to congratulate our girls basketball team.
Yeah.
I think you were there.
I was there,
I
yeah.
saw you from afar.
Yeah.
Tough loss on
It
Sunday
was.
night to a very good Tuckahoe team, but the girls, I thought, had a very good season overall. And I'm sorry to see their season come to a close, but that being said, they represented Haldane really well throughout the course of the basketball season.
They did, and they played with such heart. It was
They
a
did.
tough
They
game,
hung
and
in
those
there.
girls hung in there the whole time. It was very impressive.
The last thing I wanted to share was express an appreciation of thanks to Ms. Secor and Ms. McGrath, 2 of our high school social studies teachers who coordinated a visit yesterday from Congressman Lawler. And 50 students gave up their lunch or had their lunch with them for a question and answer period with the congressman. Had the opportunity to sit in. I thought our kids, again, represented themselves really well. Asked some really tough questions of the congressman, and he was really candid and forthright in his responses on a variety of policy issues. And I think emphasized most importantly that we could, there's things maybe we agree on in this room and there's things we disagree on, but those matters that we may, a policy that we see differently, we can do so in a rational and respectful manner. And I think our kids really modeled that really well, as did the congressman, of course, and it was a great learning opportunity for everyone who was a part of it. And thanks to Ms. Secor and Ms. McGrath for coordinating, the students who attended, and the congressman for visiting our school. It was a wonderful visit. Let's see here. I think with that, if I could transition, we have two students who are here with us this evening. If Genevieve Knox and Max Sanders, welcome. They're going to provide our student government update for our Board of Education.
So there's like a couple things going on right now, like electives are, we're trying to get like some more electives, Haldane offers many different options for students when they arrive at high school. But because of how small our school is, there's a limit to like the course options. Like, for example, like if somebody wants to like major in a science, we could add like an anatomy class or something. And we are also trying to like match the middle and high school schedules to make transitioning from middle to high school easier for students.
Talked about just before the girls basketball team. Over the weekend, they just played and unfortunately lost in the semifinals against LaFell. However, the boys team, they're playing on March 3rd against LaFell, I think. And additionally, spring sports are coming up with sports as lacrosse, softball, baseball, track, and for the first time, there's boys tennis with Brewster, which is pretty cool for the boys that want to play tennis.
And SATs are coming up for seniors. And on Friday, February 16th, the class of 2023 valedictorian Helena Kottman and salutatorian Amelia Cupper were announced. Percy Parker and Camilla McDaniel will also represent Haldane at the Regional Poetry Out Loud Contest in the University of New Paltz on Tuesday, February 27th.
There are some class trips coming up with the freshman class going to Broadway on March 27th, along with the sophomore class going to the Franklin D. Roosevelt Presidential Library Museum. And the juniors are going to Washington, D.C. for their class trip. And the seniors are going to Boston for the yearly senior trip, which is new this year because normally they go to Six Flags.
That's everything.
Yeah.
That's everything, Max. Genevieve, thank you. Any questions from our board members for our students?
I do. I have a question. So how are you going about collecting, students' points of view on what electives should be offered?
We just like asked around in the hallway and like we made a sheet of like who like wants some and like who doesn't.
Who doesn't want more?
Like about, yeah.
Are there any really wild electives that anybody's asking for?
No, it was kind of just like basic ones like anatomy and like maybe like more like computer science classes and stuff like that.
Okay.
I'm interested in that anatomy was the elective that people chose.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's the elective I would have chosen in middle school.
And a lot of students are also asking for more AP electives, and which I think would be cool to add.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you so
both.
much for coming.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, of course.
you.
Thank you for having us.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
So at this point, we're going to open, I'd like a motion to open the public hearing on the senior citizen and volunteer firefighter and ambulance worker tax exemptions. Yeah.
So moved.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. So now we're opening the public hearing to give the board and the public the opportunity to ask questions and make comments on the proposed senior citizen and volunteer firefighter and ambulance worker tax exemptions. And so really this is an opportunity for the board to ask questions of our business official and the superintendent. And then as well, once that's concluded, to open the hearing to members of the public to make comments. Then we might wrap it up with any additional questions from the board. Just as a heads up, so that people know, while we're having the public hearing at this point, the board will not act on these resolutions until much later in the meeting. So right now really is just an opportunity for us to ask questions and comment. So with that, is there anybody on the board who has any questions for Catherine or John?
I'm not going to answer any questions.
Phil.
but
Sorry, Phil.
I'm always going to ask a couple.
Yeah.
I did have a question, and it may be just sort of procedural, but, or maybe not procedural, just math or given to us. On the income limits for senior citizens, I know this is something an exemption that we had for a while, but the income levels were static for many years, and they have been changed. Do you have any sense, were those new levels given to us as $40,000 as starting? Okay, so it wasn't based on CPI or cost? Okay. Okay, cool. And on the volunteer ambulance, firefighters, ambulance workers, all that sorts of stuff. Where was my? Okay, so within the lifetime, it says 20 years of service within the school district. So does that define service to within the school district? Okay, so for the lifetime exemption, people, volunteer ambulance and firefighters would have had to have served 20 years within the Haldane School District. Oh my God, Garrison. For others, does service area matter?
Yes, it has
Okay.
to be within.
Has to be within the district,
And
okay.
for the lifetime exemption, like say we had someone who had the exemption, a lifetime exemption in a different district, and
Yeah.
they moved here,
Yeah,
they would lose it in their old district, and then they would start accruing time here.
okay, so okay, fine, great, cool.
So there is a little bit of a nuance there, just for clarity. It says the Haldane Central School District, not the town of Phillipstown.
No.
So we have Garrison firefighters that receive, so
They're their own district.
they're their own
They're
district.
their own district.
And so whether or not, so this doesn't, it doesn't matter about where their kids go or anything like that, nothing. Perfect.
Residents.
That's all I wanted to know.
Right, I mean, you wouldn't even necessarily have to have children in
No,
any school
No,
district.
I get
right?
that, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay.
Served a minimum of 5 years, okay.
I mean, go ahead. John.
No, no, cool.
No, I mean, I really appreciate the work that Dr. Benante and Catherine have put into this, right? This is something new that we're taking on, and I think for those who missed our previous discussion about this, what the board, because there's no way for the board to really estimate what the impact will be, which will be an impact on other taxpayers, because we don't know the level at which folks will be entitled to these tax exemptions. The board's decision was to, it was definitely something that the board really wanted to do, but it was something that the board felt like in our responsibility to all taxpayers in the district, that was something we needed to actually start at a somewhat modest level and really get a sense of what the potential impact is, because there will be an impact on folks who take up the taxes that are no longer paid by those who receive the exemptions.
I did have a question. What defines eligibility?
What do you mean by, like,
What's an eligible fire? Maybe one of our guests will be able to answer in a minute, but what does it mean to be a eligible volunteer firefighter and volunteer ambulance worker? What defines eligibility?
I think being one?
I think the
I'm not
department
sure.
the departments each have their own points or something, and I'm sure that they could.
Okay.
get into that.
Okay.
They have to fill out an application. We
Yeah.
won't do
Okay.
any of the vetting of that.
Yep.
It'll go through the Department of Real Tax Property Services.
Okay, so certification of eligibility rests with the entity. Yeah, okay,
Not with us.
okay.
And are these resolutions or decisions that we vote on every year, or is it permanent? I know you said this at the last presentation.
We can relook at them next year.
Okay.
That's what a lot of districts are doing, is they're starting with one so that they can do an actual financial analysis of what the tax shift is, and then deciding if they want to go further or, and that's for both exemptions, not just, it's for the sliding scale for the seniors and the volunteer exemptions.
So if I could also just add to that, based on the discussion that the board had at our last meeting, or the last time we discussed it, those may not be one and the same. We set two components at what we would say would be a higher threshold for eligibility. So the minimum service requirement at 5 years, where you could set it as low as 2. But we decided to set it at 5, as well as an exemption level of 3%. The max exemption level is 10%. And the purpose of that being, I think the majority of eligible volunteers would fall within that category. That being said, based on discussion that the board had, we did set within the resolution as it currently exists, the lifetime exemption of 10% for those with 20 years of service, which is the maximum. And then also any unremarried spouses of deceased eligible volunteer firefighters or ambulance workers. We set that at 10%, which is the maximum as well. And that was just based on the discussion that the board had and feeling like the board wanted to do more sooner for individuals who would fall within those categories while we examine what the tax shift will be. And I think that's an important note that Catherine had shared. This is a tax shift. So we could see what the tax shift would be, present that information back to the Board of Education next year, and determine if you would want to shift or change the eligibility criteria to a lower number of years of service and a higher exemption rate.
Catherine, I know we discussed this.
Oh,
Quite
Ezra,
good.
can you
Oh,
please use
yeah.
the microphone?
I know, you mean a microphone, yeah? Would be helpful. I know we discussed this pretty much at length in the last meeting, but basically, you had said that what we're doing here is pretty pat. It's kind of like standard of what neighboring districts have done.
I mean,
So-
every district is doing it slightly differently, but yes, we
But
are
for the most
within
part.
we are within the standards
The
of other
norms.
districts.
Gotcha.
Just one last thing, I just want to make sure that on that first one, where it says therefore be it resolved, the property tax exemption for eligible, permitting volunteer, residing, right now it just says residing within this Haldane Central School District and who have served a minimum of 5 years, that be clear that that's for, served a minimum of 5 years within the school district.
I see.
To map to the lifetime.
John, you make
John-
the point that they should be working in, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at, you want North Highlands guys that have put their time in there and Cold Spring guys that have put their time in
Yeah,
there.
absolutely.
That's,
Absolutely.
you want to
I
make
think
sure
that's
that's
the
clear.
intent, right.
That's the intent, obviously, yeah.
And women.
Yes.
Yeah, I was
Guys, it ragazzi, you know?
actually, I just, John, can you just point out what you were talking about?
Yeah, with the first one, it says, do you have it, Megan?
I do.
Okay, cool.
It's on the fourth line of that resolution. Served a minimum of 5 years within the Haldane Central School
Okay.
District.
Yep, and then the second one, after therefore be resolved.
Okay, yep, that makes sense.
There's another one in there. Cool,
Um,
thank you.
Well, I know this, I really appreciate the work that Catherine and Dr. Benante have put into this. Do we have other questions before we want to open to public comments?
No.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
So at this point, it's a public hearing. If anybody has public comments that they'd like to make, please do so. Thanks for giving us your contact information.
I'm 55-year-old firefighter, so.
You're a what?
Good evening. My name is Aaron Leonard, and as the president of the Cold Spring Fire Company, I come before you with a matter of profound importance for our community's safety and resilience. Our mission to provide unparalleled fire and life safety services is at a critical juncture. I would point out that some of the information you have, you may find to be incorrect. For example, the majority of our firefighters that are active have less than 5 years of service, not 20 years of service. Our mission to provide that unparalleled fire and life safety services is at a critical juncture, largely influenced by our capacity to recruit and retain dedicated volunteers willing to become active interior firefighters. This is the single most important category of firefighter at our firehouse, with the training and skills needed to perform individual and team-level fire and rescue tasks with minimal supervision. All ranks and positions above the interior firefighters, such as our apparatus operators and fire officers, begin their careers as interior firefighters. In the past few years, our efforts to bolster our ranks of interior firefighters have been challenged by a notable decline in volunteer engagement, prompting an in-depth analysis of our recruitment and retention strategies. This analysis revealed a pressing need for a multifaceted approach that includes financial incentives. Central to our strategy is the implementation of a robust property tax exemption for our volunteers. This exemption, vital for acknowledging the sacrifices and dedication of our volunteers, is a tangible measure that significantly enhances our appeal to potential and current members alike. By fully implementing this exemption now, we signal to our volunteers that their service is not only valued, but also rewarded in a manner reflective of their crucial role in our community. The volunteer firefighter and ambulance worker tax exemption legislation was designed to aid volunteer fire departments in recruiting first and retention second. Our analysis clearly shows suspense that members of our community that are most likely to volunteer and remain active interior firefighters are homeowners with well-established roots in this community, including families that attend Haldane. We need the full power of every incentive available to recruit that demographic. When you establish the tax exemption policy, I ask that you consider whether partial benefits will meet the legislative intent and the needs of this community. As a retired U.S. Army officer with over 3 decades of organizational leadership experience, and having served as a senior leader at this firehouse, I can confidently state that anything less than full implementation does not meet the intended purpose and falls significantly short of fulfilling the needs of our community. Again, I stand before you to request your full support in implementing the property tax exemption to its fullest extent. This support is not only a gesture of goodwill, but a critical investment in the safety and security of our community. By enabling us to recruit and retain volunteers, unpaid firefighters, willing to commit to volunteering as active interior firefighters, you help ensure that the Cold Spring Fire Company remains robust, responsive, and ready to meet the challenges of tomorrow. I thank you for your time and for considering our request. Together, we can continue to protect and serve our community with the dedication and excellence it deserves.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. Thank you, Aaron. He had beautiful remarks. I do not have any remarks prepared, so I'll just speak to you straight out. My name is Steve Sherman. I'm a firefighter at the North Highlands Engine Company No. 1, and I'm the chair of the Board of Fire Commissioners of the Phillipstown North Highlands Fire District. Essentially what we do is get up in the middle of the night or at any time during the day, on weekends, holidays, 365, 24/7, and go out as fast as we can to address an emergency in our community. And we are volunteers. We do this because we believe in it and because it's the right thing to do. And we need to do this job. We need equipment. We need all that stuff. We need extensive training, which we do on an ongoing and regular basis. We need families who understand. We need bosses and jobs who understand. And more than anything, we need members. We need actual people, men and women who can do this job and get the job done. And as Aaron said, recruitment is at a crucial juncture at this point. Incentives make a huge difference. Yes, the 3% could have some impact on taxpayers. A few more dollars here and there. We don't know, and we'll find out, I guess. But what I can tell you and what I can guarantee is that there will be a huge, huge impact on taxpayers, citizens, if we're not able to get to the emergency scene in record time, and if we're not trained and able to do what we have to do in order to save our own loved ones. Your children, my children, our families, our homes, whether a car wreck or a fire in a house. So that's where the impact will be felt. And at that point, I can guarantee you more dollars for taxes, a few more dollars for taxes, will not be considered an impact. So what we're asking is for your full support to do what we do, to retain the membership we have, to bring in new members. We're very proud to have a number of Haldane grads in our ranks, in fact, many. We want to continue this tradition. We want to maintain a community that all of us are proud to live in because we feel safe. And I can tell you that from these people in the room, if my son or daughter were in a car accident or my house were on fire, these are the very people that I would hope to God would come out and do their job. So we're asking for your full support. Frankly, 3% is wonderful. We thank you. We're grateful. Won't do anything. Really won't have an impact here. And we need the help. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm just going to start by responding. I really appreciate hearing what you all have to say. I feel I'm going to be really transparent here. So this is a relatively new proposition for us. The board has not been considering this very long. I actually was not aware of it before a couple of months ago. I want to make, and I'll be honest, at this point, part of me is wondering why are school boards, I'm not really sure I even get the system of why school boards are responsible for making these tax exemptions. I mean, of course, everyone on the school board is deeply appreciative of all the work of all the firefighters and ambulance workers. I mean, enormously appreciative. I mean, I've had people come to my house. Absolutely, it's who we all rely on. I'll be honest, though, I am confused. Why is this lying with the Board of Education? It doesn't really seem to fit for me. And so, under these circumstances, I'm having to wear both hats of my deep appreciation of the work that the firefighters do, but also my obligation to really to go into a change like this with a clear understanding of what the tax shift is going to be, recognizing that both perspectives are really important. But I'll be honest, at this, even I was enormously moved by the statements that were made, still, realizing the need to wear both of these hats. The deep appreciation as a community member and someone who benefits from the work of firefighters, as well as a member of the Board of Education that does need to be a responsible steward in how we think about taxation for all the members of the school district. So yeah, that's what I have to say at this point.
Oh, no, what I was going to say is I appreciate what you said, Peggy, and I wanted to about the, it's true that this is our last opportunity to discuss.
For this year.
For the exemption to take place for next year's
And then,
school
so it is a
taxes.
somewhat compressed period of time for us personally in terms of when we
Today's
start.
the day, right?
Correct.
Today
You
is
have
the
to do
day when it
before
has to
March
happen.
1st.
So there's no time for deliberation.
No, that's the frustrating
Okay, I
piece,
just wanted to
yes.
put out there and be clear. And remind me again what the our immediate neighbor that Guff's is doing over there. I'm just curious.
I think they did 10%.
They do. They get a 10% in our immediate neighbors.
Just I would more appreciate Guff's thinking about how they could reallocate tuition.
I was thinking that.
But I'll throw that out
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So,
Well, it's uncomfortable
uh-huh.
in the way that I think I hear you saying, but we're the one, I
Right,
guess we're in charge of the ones charging the taxes,
Right.
right? And so-
right. No, it seems to, I mean, honestly, there needs to be compensation. It is weird to me that
Yeah.
a school board is, like, there's no doubt about it, that there needs to be compensation, especially some kind of compensation, right? Like, given the importance of firefighters and given what, we hear as being, a challenge of recruitment. There was another person from the public who wanted to make a comment, yeah.
I too do not have something as well prepared, so I am going to shoot from the hip. Kristen Van Tassel. I am a 35, almost 36-year member of the Phillipstown North Highlands Fire District and the North Highlands Engine Company #1. I have been the treasurer for the fire district for the last 19 years, and I have held the volunteer position of treasurer of the engine company for well over 20 years, on and off. Speaking from a fiscal standpoint, I know you were concerned about why you're being held this responsibility.
It's just weird to me that the school board is doing it when I feel like it belongs to the larger public or the towns or something. I don't know. That's just me.
And I understand that, and I appreciate that. However, each taxing entity, each taxing district comes up with their own resolution. So the Phillipstown North Highlands Fire District, the Garrison School District, the Haldane School District, the county, the town, they all come up with their own resolution. I think the bigger impact here is when you say you can't quantify, and I apologize if I'm putting words in your mouth. The North Highlands Fire District came up with 2 and 10, 2 years, 10%. For you to be able to quantify how much this might affect your school taxes, although we're in the 11th hour here, I believe that in reading your resolution, it's a minimum of 5 years. You should be able, from surrounding fire departments, be able to obtain that information of who is a 5-year member and who actually owns property within this district. I think you will find that there aren't many members. You might find either more rentals or you will find children, young adults, living with their parents, and they will not get that tax exemption. There are people now working 3 or more jobs just to pay their bills. The amount of hours that is now required to become a trained firefighter is so much so that people could get a degree. They could get college credit for it, and they are choosing to volunteer. The cost of not trying to assist members in continuing to live in this community is slim compared to what it would cost to have paid firefighters. And I don't have numbers, but it's a fact. Those numbers have been run. I do wish that you would highly consider the 2 and 10. Members like myself who have put many years into the service would appreciate that, continuing to try and live in this community. And it does incent those that we are trying to encourage and recruit, knowing the amount of hours that they have to volunteer. And again, they could be doing it for a paid job, they could be doing it for college credit, and they're not. There needs to be some form of incentive. And right now, it's finances that are hurting families. And we understand that this will put a burden on other families. However, the ones that are getting up in the middle of the night, this is a volunteer like no other organization. I've been involved in Little League in the past. I've been involved in the Football Association. I've been involved in many volunteer organizations. If they fold, it would be sad to see the children not have those opportunities. If the fire department folds because we can't get volunteers, it will have a huge impact among the entire community. I just want that to be thought about.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Michael, you've raised your hand twice. Did you have something that you wanted to say?
just wanted to clarify that the reason it's before
Please come to the
Oh,
microphone.
yeah, please come to the microphone, yeah. It is a public hearing, it's a meeting.
So Mike Bowman, Village of Knoxville resident. I've been a firefighter for 13 years or something like that. My son is in Haldane. I'm a graduate of Haldane High School. I just wanted to make the point that the reason it's before you all is because you charge the greatest tax burden in the community. So it's going to have the most impact if you do the 2 and 10 for us. I mean, 2 or 10% on our village taxes, 10% on the town taxes doesn't make a big deal. 10% on the my school bill is going to make a huge deal. And it's going to make a big deal for people that move here that we're trying to get to volunteer for our organization. I understand what you're saying about starting low and seeing what the impact is, but if Garrison can do this, Haldane can do this. I guess that's the point that I would like to make. All right? Thank you.
I'm sorry, just as a follow-up, I just wanted to clarify that it's 10% of the assessed valuation of your home. It is not 10% of your school taxes. So, just so everyone is aware of that.
Can I ask questions
Sure.
of our attendees, people who have spoken? How many eligible, let's go down both, how many eligible in Cold Spring right now? 9? And it's a point system accrued over?
Under the 5 years you offered is 6.
6. And again, it's an annual. How does eligibility work? How about let's start there.
We use the length of service awards program.
Aaron, would you mind just coming to the
Sorry,
microphone?
I'm going to make you go up here. So people at home.
And
can-
Aaron, I'm sorry, just the meetings are recorded and
I understand.
community members watch, so.
Are you familiar with the length of service award program?
No.
LoSAP is a program that's, that we buy into, Cold Spring, the Village of Cold Spring buys into, that allows us to accrue essentially a pension that we can earn for payment later in life when we're retired. It's meant to be a recruiting tool, but it's also meant to be an encouragement for length of service, right? So every year, as an active firefighter, I must respond to 10% of the fire calls to get 25 points. And then I must earn another 25 points in drills or meetings that occur throughout the year, and have a total of 50 points.
Okay.
We have 9 active firefighters who qualified for LoSAP that own a home in this community, but 3 of those are less than 5 years of service.
Okay. And that eligibility is an annual?
It's an annual.
Okay. So if you qualify for 1 year and then the next year you're sick or you get injured, or you can't come out, you can't hit your points, you will no longer be eligible for that year, but then you can re-up the next year. Is that how it works?
That's right.
Okay.
So today I picked up the certification letters from the Cold Spring Village clerk. They certified our active firefighters who live here in Cold Spring or in the Haldane district, and then using the LoSAP points. That's good for 1 year.
Okay.
So our members take that document with a tax form, an application, to the assessor's office. Those 2 documents alone will get them the tax exemption for the next year.
Got it.
They have to redo it every year
Makes sense.
until they hit 20.
Yep.
And once they hit 20, they do it one time and they get it for the life.
Perfect. Thank you. And North Highlands, I don't know whether you can speak for North Highlands
No, I
eligible.
can't speak for
What's the current status of eligible members on an annual basis?
I would say it's very similar to Cold Springs as far as the numbers.
So like 9?
Homeowners, probably around that number. I mean,
Okay.
I'd have to actually look at
Okay.
our rules, but we're very similar as far as membership.
Okay. And is the, I apologize, I should know this, is the North Highlands District a taxing entity?
Yes.
Okay. So, all right. So there is revenue that comes from your ability to tax citizens as well. That you can, they're not revenue, but, yeah, go.
Get the treasurer.
I'm the treasurer of the district.
Yeah.
So, yes, we tax just the North Highlands Fire District residents,
Sure.
not the entire Haldane community. Or,
Totally fair. Yep. So there is a taxing entity that serves the North Highlands Fire Company that can set its own tax rates, by virtue of the voting of the North Highlands
That is
Board of
correct.
Directors.
That is
Okay.
correct. We have a board of fire commissioners, we operate very similar to the town.
Yep.
Where the public can come out to a public hearing, but they do not vote on our budget.
Okay.
The board of fire commissioners votes on our budget after the public hearing.
Okay. Is there a cap on the amount that you can raise your taxes every year?
We are on the 2% cap
Yours
as well. However,
similar?
as you know, that can be overridden, but
Yeah,
we are
okay.
the same as, we are a municipality.
How, is it overridden by the vote of the directors?
Overwritten by vote of Board of Fire Commissioners, my apologies.
Okay,
Mhm.
a little bit different. We have to get everybody in the, in the district to
No,
vote.
no. It's just overridden, again, because the public does not vote on our
Right.
budget. They just come out and they can voice their opinion at the public hearing.
Right.
But the Board of Fire Commissioners, they do the vote.
They're
and-
the voting on
Yep,
the, and the
correct.
fire commissioners are voted in by
There is
the
an election,
residents of the-
that is
yeah,
correct.
okay, fine.
And it is a 5-year term.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
That was actually very helpful. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I will say, the presentation of a number, that's a new part of the conversation we've had. I mean, in our last meeting, much of what we communicated about was how difficult it might be to estimate what the hit would be for both of these pots and pools that we're discussing, the scale of 9 feels a lot different in many ways than the scale we're talking about of the really unknown about how many homeowners who are going to be receiving the other. So, I don't often feel like we're at the point where we're voting on something and I have this much sort of apprehension about moving forward, quite honestly. And so I feel like now that all the information is coming out and I look at it, I am inclined to want to still think, we're thinking about moderation in all things. It's the first time that's been presented before us. Perhaps it is in our best interest to know what we're getting into before we get there. But I do think these are two very different groups in the community that we're discussing at this point, and that it may not necessarily be in everyone's best interest to treat them the same in one way as we talk about that. So I'm just, in my line of work, we say yellow zone, and I'm speaking in the yellow zone because I'm speaking in one way from my heart, but I do feel that way. It's a surprise to me as I look over it at this point, just in full transparency. That's why I asked the question about the timing of this. We've never been in a position in which we have thought about reconsidering something that's on the agenda.
Right.
The evening in which we have to, and the only evening in which we get to, amend it if we were going to amend it, even though this isn't an addition. So, find myself in a strange position. Thought I would enter that into the record because.
So a strange undecided position or a strange?
Certainly coming in more undecided than I
Yeah.
was before
Right.
about
Right.
the wisdom,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, of it, all things considered.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. I will say, I do feel we do owe it to our seniors to show them the same respect that we are going to show anybody else who might benefit from this. So that was my the original wisdom, I think, was let's treat both of these parties who tend to benefit from this with the same assessment. We don't know, we don't have numbers. But I now feel like, well, could we have done better diligence to get a sense of what the impact would be by contacting the firehouses beforehand and getting a sense of the actual number of people that this might affect and what the redistribution of that tax burden might be to others. And I don't know if that's the case. I certainly didn't do it. I probably should have. But yeah.
I see real quick, Catherine, super fast. Garrison passed it initially 10-2. Yes, yeah, they did. They just went, what else? They went in. Mayapack, no.
No, Mayapack was 3 and 5.
And then changed? Right,
After a year, they assessed
And
the
then
tax
changed.
Just
value.
voted on it, yeah.
And they voted.
right? And then they bumped it,
We did.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so,
The only thing, I don't know where everyone's numbers are coming from, but Dr. Benante and I did work with the town to get the number of eligible, and it came back as 118. So that's why, no.
You
and
guys
that's
got
why I'm like, that's not
118?
even close, so,
where are the rest of you?
Maybe
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if
yeah,
that total volunteers.
Maybe, yeah.
And probably including Garrison
So,
in that. And
yeah. So unfortunately, we were using a number that was
Right.
Okay.
slightly different than we are hearing tonight.
There's volunteers that are in the membership that don't get the points.
That don't
That's
make
probably the
Yeah.
difference.
I see,
There are many
I
who
see.
are not,
And they just never will make their points, that's not.
Right.
what they're here for.
and there are many who are not allowed to go on calls, they're not
Trained.
designated, so they're not active
Mhm.
members. They support us in other ways, associate members help us with pizza nights and our clam nights.
Sure.
that kind of thing.
It's good pizza.
Count me in.
Well, this Friday.
Just to answer and respond to Ezra's piece, we, in looking at what other districts were doing, framed our recommendation very similar to how Mayapack had approached it, knowing that, one, Mayapac's a community that has a large number of volunteers, individuals who would be eligible, seeing how they structured it, and then with the spirit of taking a year, examining the tax shift, so then the board could be further informed in deciding to go or increase those eligibility levels to lower thresholds. Again, careful of how I frame that so as to not cause confusion. So Mayapack had done somewhere around 3%, might have been 2%, 3%, 5 years of service. They examined it for a year. Were able to provide the board with a full analysis of what the tax shift was to the other community members, and then made the recommendation based on that information to increase or lower the threshold to 2 years and then 10%, which was what, well, I can't say what, we were going to do next year because we're not there yet, but that the spirit was certainly to collect the information in the same way, to in some way speak to honoring what Peggy had shared about being mindful of the fact that there's a number of community members that this impacts that are not in this room. And it's not expected to be a significant tax shift, but that being said, feeling that the board has a responsibility to the community members who are not present, and at least knowing before they act on an item what the shift of taxes is for a neighbor who is not here.
Right.
So we obviously take that very seriously and want to make sure that we're being deliberate, and yes, it is deliberate in our approach in doing so.
Right. I mean, one of the things I'm wondering, so what I hear, the comments about.
One last.
Oh,
piece of
I
information.
apologize, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No.
Because it may be relevant to the discussion. One thing I can say, just in examining the other school districts that have done it, the tax, if it's relevant to tonight's conversation, the tax shift that occurs through the volunteer firefighter and ambulance worker exemption is not as significant as the tax shift that occurs with the senior exemption. Now, we don't know the population of eligible seniors in the community. That's not something you can call up and, get necessarily a figure on, and it changes every year. But in observing other communities that have adopted the resolutions, that maybe they're a year ahead of us, the tax shift has not been what I would say significant. There's a value statement there, but certainly in comparison to the senior exemption, it's
And this is for next year's budget? This would impact
it
next
would
year's
be
budget?
for the 24, 25 school taxes, so taxes we're collecting or in September.
And right now, but even from just the conversation that we had, there's one set of numbers sitting there. There's a different number sitting over here. So Mayapack, when they went through the first round, at least then they got a sense of what the actual numbers were,
Right.
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
So the last thing you want to be doing is sitting there and be like, oh, well, we didn't think of that. And now we blew a hole in the budget. So I mean, I understand where you're coming from.
The unique
Yeah,
thing
that
is,
was the rationale.
you know,
That's the
we
rationale.
the
probably got
rationale.
everybody in the room
get
that
it.
could figure out the numbers.
Yeah.
That's the unique thing about being a part of a smaller community.
That is an advantage.
Peggy, what were you going to suggest?
Oh, well,
I'm sorry.
so, no, it's fine. So I just want to clarify that really the piece that we're talking about, of all the different multiple resolutions that are on for us to consider, we're really, again, looking ahead to what the actual resolutions are and the agenda later on. We're really talking about the first resolution about what folks have been referring to, the 3% property exemption for volunteer firefighters and
Correct.
volunteer ambulance workers serving North Highlands or Cold Spring and who have served a minimum of 5 years. I mean, that's really
That's
what
the
the
piece.
I
The
just
others
wanna
are at the maximum.
Yeah, The others are at the maximum. Okay.
Actually, they don't have to be, in the reading of the resolution, they don't have to serve North Highlands or Cold Spring.
But
They
I
could
think
serve-
that's one of the things that we clarified, that.
No,
that-
they just
no.
have to be a volunteer firefighter who lives in the district. They could volunteer someplace else, right?
No, there's a problem
No?
with the resolution. We're gonna actually have to change the wording
Oh,
of the
okay.
resolution to
All
make
right,
that
so
clear.
the wording, why not?
Yep, just like the 20-year member can't move here and get the credit,
Yeah,
you can't not serve in the community that
Yeah,
you're asking for
yeah,
the credit.
yeah.
So if you have 5 years in, you have to move here to get the credit.
okay,
On the
so
outside,
that needs to be clarified definitely in here, because right now
Yeah.
it reads a volunteer firefighter who lives in the district.
Right, and
Not
it-
who both, yeah.
And it needs to be clarified.
Change that, I thought that was the
I thought that was a change you pointed out.
No,
You also require that the authority having jurisdiction must certify. So you understand who that is?
you,
No, it's not me. It's the Board of Trustees for Cold Spring.
Right.
Because they certify our length of service award
Right.
points. And that's where I get the number of, in Cold Spring, total number is 9.
right,
4 of those folks have 20 years.
right.
There's only 2 firefighters in Cold Spring that have more than 5 years that would qualify.
Yeah.
I don't know what valuable information you're gonna get from the budget shift with such a small number
Right.
of 5-year members, right?
I apologize, Catherine, if we did get a number that was in, of 100 or more. I didn't put it in my notes, but,
No,
Well, I think
it was the-
I asked
the-
last time, and you didn't have the exact number that would have been
Yeah.
impacted by the wording in the resolution.
Yeah, okay.
So I think that was supposed to be coming,
yeah.
Right.
and I didn't see it until.
Well, I mean, I don't know exactly the right way to move forward, and I have no reason to doubt the information that we're getting from the folks who are here tonight. I mean, I don't have no reason to doubt it whatsoever, but I think I still am, to go back to my previous comments, as well as what Dr. Benante said earlier, right, that there's one group of people in the audience, and we haven't heard from the other taxpayers who are potentially impacted. I recognize that it's not, that the perception of the folks here is that it's not going to be a huge shift, but it is a shift of some kind. So there's a part of me that's sort of wanting to move towards a compromise and then a stated intent. So one possible route that we could speak to would be to, for this first year that we're trying it, modify this first resolution from property exemptions of 3% in 5 years, and maybe do it, right? So I'm gonna cut the difference, say 5% and serving a minimum of 2 or 3 years. And to do that for 1 year with the intention of wanting to move this to the full as soon as possible, but still, I'm still gonna stay with my position of, as the Board of Education, again, not to minimize the importance of volunteer firefighters or volunteer ambulance workers, but needing to fulfill our collective responsibility to the body of taxpayers to follow our original intent, to take an initial step to assess the potential tax shift, but with the stated intention that if that impact is as minimum as it's being suggested it would be, that we would move to a more significant, I think going full in one night without giving the rest of the public an opportunity to weigh in on it, honestly, I personally don't feel comfortable with that. But I do feel like I have learned very much, and I'm enormously appreciative of everyone who's come and made these comments. Anyway, in the spirit of wanting to be responsive, but also wanting to be responsible, that's one potential approach we could take. But that's just
I
one.
like the responsive and responsible. That was well done. Yeah, I agree. I think we should maintain some optionality. And I also agree that I don't think the total number is going to be that much. I also recognize that this will be a first time for current volunteer members of all fire departments. So this will be a benefit that you will accrue for a year. And that, yes, it will potentially decrease your recruiting capabilities. Well, arguably, it'll increase your recruiting capabilities for the year that it goes in versus what you have now, but maybe not as much as you'd like because we're not all the way there. But in a year, given a minimum change and no feedback from the community, I think we'd be intent to move there. I think just in general, as I really wrestled with this too, I think if I had to put my hat on and went out and survey every other tax-paying member of the Haldane School District, I think everyone would be like, it makes sense. I can't do it. I have obligations or work in the city or whatever. And I value volunteer fire. It doesn't matter that much to me, a slight increase in my overall taxes to recognize people who volunteer. That's from an intent, I get it. To Peggy's point, I think it makes very little sense that school taxes is the mechanism to
That's my point.
to facilitate recruitment and retention of fire departments. I understand that that is the situation in which you're in, but it makes no sense to me at all. So, like, if there are other ways that we can go about this, that would be phenomenal, but we can't. And I also struggle, frankly, every year the fact that we have a Butterfield Library line on our vote. I'm like, I love libraries.
Yeah.
Why is this on the school budget?
Yeah.
Makes no sense to me. So,
Right. Yeah.
process, disagree with, intent, agree with. I think we need some optionality in the middle.
Can I say one more thing?
If you'd I mean, yeah, but I'd actually like to hear from the board since we're in the middle of a discussion, but absolutely, we definitely want to hear from you. Yeah, is there any?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think you all know sort of how I feel about it, and I always feel like I have to say, disclose the fact that I'm married to one of these guys, and, my household stands to benefit. I do want to disclose one more thing, that the firefighter in my household, told me that he didn't make his points this year, so it won't impact us for September. So I do feel like,
Maggie, we don't
I
think
know,
you have a
well,
conflict of interest.
Not at all.
Right?
It's kind of a conflict, but I don't know. I feel like as a member who's not, a community member and a board member who's not going to benefit in September, I'd be willing to. It's a different type of volunteerism, right? John said last time that volunteers shouldn't really seek to be paid, and I agree with that as a coach. But this is completely different. It's a different job. And if we didn't have this, our taxes would go through the roof because we would have to, pay for paid fire services. And I just feel that, maybe it's more flipping it and going in, at a larger parameter. And then if it's a really big tax impact, then we can switch
Then
it
backing up.
faster.
So
Yeah,
Maggie,
then backing up.
So Maggie, so I just want to reiterate, I've been sort of like compromised. John is like compromised, but also I think that the public would support it. And Maggie, you are like, a different approach would be to go
All
to
in.
the 2 and 10, right? The 2 and 10. And then if that was a concern, then like if we felt like
We
there
can
really
revisit
was a tax shift, then
Mhm.
but that's an option.
That sounds tough,
Yeah, that would be a hard thing to do.
because then you tell guys, you pay less. Now we're gonna pay. now you're
The
gonna pay
floor
more.
falls out in the budget, and there's no state aid that we don't get that much of.
I would have a tough time.
Our budget's not gonna be,
Um,
right, but
Just for simple things, this is a benefit that has never been provided in this community.
That's correct.
That's correct, right? And so we're trying to provide this benefit with an intent of maximizing this benefit. I mean, it's not like you've avoided that. The question is, and you just mentioned 5% and 2.
That was my,
A
yeah,
suggestion.
that was sort of like a
Suggestion.
cut, like a
5%.
potential starting point for a compromise, yeah. Or something, I don't know if compromise is the right word, but
You know,
different step.
either way, I think that we're gonna wind up at 10 and 2. I think we're gonna find out either way that we go. It's not gonna be the shift of which, Catherine loses her mind, you know, and I don't want you to. So I think, you know, honestly, if you asked me right now, I'm fine with either one. I'm totally fine. I understand going 5 and 2. I understand going 10 and 2. I could easily take 5 and 2, recognizing that you're gonna go there anyway. This is a benefit of which the community hasn't had. It's good to get this going, right? It seems very common sense to me, okay?
Do you have
There are 5 people on this board. You know, what you said, I do not want to be and I think that someone at one point, the word waffler going back and forth, and I think I'm not a waffler by any means. I agree with what you're saying, Ezra. I do have a sense that it might get to 10 and 2. You know, acknowledging the fact that, as was announced earlier today, there are in fact 2, you know, trustees as of yet to be elected
right, for next year.
to enter the board next year, and we have no idea who those people are going to be and what their opinion or point of view is going to be as well. So let's not in any way make the assumption that whatever happens next year
That's
is
a fair point.
going to happen. So just want to be clear, like, we have the ability to make a decision now that we may not have next time, but I just want to put that out there as well, say that. Even that being said, I still feel like it's likely that we're going to get to 10 and 2 as well. I do feel like it's important that we should all feel comfortable with 10 and 2 or 5 and 2. And I will continue to look to the leadership of Peggy and both Maggie on that, because I think it's important to do that as well. I don't know if we're straw polling here
Right.
or
Yeah, we're
what.
discussing.
Yeah.
We're not at the resolution yet.
Well, we're not at the resolution, but we need to
we
figure
do.
out how to get to the resolution. Yeah, we've never been in this position where we're really sort of having to think about something on such a tight timeline. Do you have anything that you want to add, Dr. Benante, any chance?
I just would
Keep it around.
reiterate that the board has the opportunity to consider whether it provides such an exemption or not. And I know we heard loud and clear that the board wants to consider such an exemption. So I'd be remiss if I wouldn't want anybody leaving the room, considering that, because we did not, and it's the board's decision, go to the full amount, that in some way there wasn't a respect or regard for providing an exemption for the volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers in our community. There was a loud and clear message from the board that they wanted to consider the exemption. Obviously, the administration has tried to guide the board of doing so in a manner that we felt was most responsive to the entire community, not just particularly one segment of the
I think that's
community. The numbers, as Catherine pointed out, we had a number, obviously, that was probably more a reflection of the total number of volunteers as opposed to the total number of people who are eligible. So, what we're hearing tonight, from Aaron, others, it's likely to be far less than the 100+ figure that we had. We did not seek to discern an exact figure from the either of the fire companies through over the last month while we've been doing the research on it.
I'm going to, actually, there were 2 people who had additional comments. Yes, please go to the mic and Michael did, and you too, Kristen, sorry.
Just real quick, you brought up expectations, and it's the expectation of everybody here that we're going to end up at 2 and 10.
I don't know if that's,
Well, I'm
that's
just going
the
by,
first time I'm hearing
just going
that.
by the comments that I've heard.
Yeah.
Just consider that Mayopac did this the way that the methodology that you're looking to use, and they went to 2 and 10. They're a far larger school district, far larger fire department, fire district with an enormous budget, enormous building, all that great stuff. I would put the onus on us and do 2 and 10 to start, and then have us come back next year and we reassess what the recruitment and retention has been, given that you have doubts about where we're going to end up. Because I think it is going to make a difference in terms of bringing on new members and retaining new members, and you'll see point levels and everything else go up. But I think just take into account that Mayopac did do this, Garrison did do this. There's other departments around that have kind of done the legwork already that are ending up at 2 and 10 because they're seeing that the benefit is far outweighing whatever risk that
Mike,
you're
I got
saying.
a quick question.
Sure.
When did Garrison do it?
They did it last year, yeah.
Have their numbers gone up? Because not for nothing, you know,
Yeah.
just for the point, and not to be a devil's advocate.
Yep.
But to suggest that in a year turnaround, you're gonna get incredible recruitment numbers, I don't think that's gonna be the case.
I don't think
you're gonna
incredible
see that
recruitment
in
numbers,
a year.
but
I think
the,
you have to
the
create
numbers
a
that
culture.
we're aiming for, and I
Right.
don't want to speak for anybody, is retention.
Right,
And, you know, I'll speak to myself. I'm busy. I work in Westchester.
yeah, it's a retention.
It's hard to get up at
Yeah.
3 in the morning sometimes. If I know that I need to make points to keep an exemption off my assessed value, I'm gonna get up.
Right,
Because
it's a
it's
retention.
money in my pocket. And don't get me wrong, this tax abatement, whether it goes through or not, we're all here. This is the hardcore volunteer group that you have here. It's trying to find similar people of our own ilk that'll come out and, you know, do the work that we're trying to do.
You actually mentioned something that's interesting to me. I realize that there are a limited number of, or 18, let's call them 18, people who currently qualify on eligibility, and you said something in the middle there of there will be more interest in meeting your points over the course of the year. And I think that that's not really I wouldn't classify it as a retention. You're not going to leave the force. It's do you actually do the work? Do you get up at 3 a.m.? That's a thing that we haven't really talked about, which is we're providing an incentive for the volunteers to continue to, not actually continue, but to do the work that they volunteered to do. That's interesting.
It is, and
So
again, I mean,
and-
we've hit all bases here tonight.
Yeah, yeah.
It's far too short of a meeting to go in depth into any of them.
Yeah. Well,
But I mean, there's been a very real point in time where all the departments where a department folding has not been out of the question.
yeah, no,
And things like this are designed to really bring volunteerism back from the brink, and I think that's,
yeah.
and again, it falls on your plate because, again, you're the biggest taxing entity in the community.
Correct.
Thank you.
Kristen, do you wanna say something?
Again, just from a finance standpoint, I know you don't have solid numbers, but just looking at my own school taxes, I can't imagine on average, I'm guessing, and again, this is just a guesstimate, $1,200 is probably high for an average guesstimate. If you take $1,200 and let's say there's 25 eligible members, that's $30,000. Take that $30,000 amongst the school taxing district, I guarantee you're looking at maybe $2 extra a family a year. And I say that based on the district taxes that the budget that we've done with our Board of Fire Commissioners and the budgets we've had to raise amongst the North Highlands Fire District. And we are very careful with not taxing. We know there's seniors in our district. And we have a much smaller district, and sometimes it comes out to $20 extra a year. And that $20 to make sure we keep a volunteer service afloat versus having to pay a union firefighter members is pennies. So I ask that you consider possibly quantifying or at least guesstimating $30,000 amongst amongst the Haldane School District taxpayers is pennies on the dollar. It really is. Please consider that.
Hi, good evening. My name is Travis. I'm a relatively new person, and perspective of those people who have spoken much more eloquently than I will this evening. But I think John brought up a really good point about, people volunteering and the impetus to volunteer and how can you, and I think there's a lot of great conversations here about people trying to quantify volunteerism, and I understand that may be somewhat more agnostic than our viewpoint, which is a viewpoint kind of rooted in community intangibles, brotherhood, sisterhood, passion to serve, passion to volunteer. I think Maggie raised a really good point that, there's different types of volunteerism. And I just want to speak to one thing I think I could not possibly elucidate any more clearly than Kristen and Uncle Steve and Aaron have about the tax dollar value. What I'd like to talk a little bit more about is the 2 versus 5 years. The first year of volunteerism is the hardest time for us to retain people. So to your point about, will people start to volunteer more? Will it affect their ability to volunteer or their impetus to volunteer? I think it's an interesting point for sure. I don't really think that that's what we're after, because I don't really think that that's going to be like a blip. That's going to be something people are going to maybe put a little more time in on, and that's great. You know what I mean? What we're really talking about here is that first year. Setting something at 5 years versus 2 years is a massive difference. In that first year, and I know you guys talked a lot about points, the eligibility requirements. Again, super important stuff to talk about. But what we're missing in this conversation is the 240 hours of class you have to take in that first year. And that class is an hour away both ways, so let's round it up to 300 hours. That's just the first year. So in that first year, in addition to all those points you got to go to, and all the training you have to do to keep yourself safe and so you can stand a fighting chance of keeping a community member safe, you also have to do 240 hours of class, plus the driving, plus the homework, plus the awesome study sessions with people from around the county, plus meeting neighbors, all that kind of stuff. That's the great stuff about it. That's the family stuff. But in that first year is when people who are really inspired, really passionate, they've just moved to Cold Spring, they have a young family, they don't have a young family, they're building a young family, whatever it is, whatever their demographic is, for some reason, they decided they're driven to come in. They're driven to help people they don't know yet. And that's fantastic. And those are the people that we also really want to incentivize to get up at 3 a.m. after they've been at class for 7 hours and after they've been at work for 10 hours. That first year, showing those people how much we appreciate them and setting the bar of eligibility at an attainable space for them, whether they're going to go on in a few years and hurt their leg or get pregnant or have a spouse that gets pregnant or something and they might drift off a little bit, they're going to come back. Once we have them through that training, that's that sort of crucible that our members go through, and once we get them in there in that time period, they're far more likely to stay. And that's based on a lot of other national FEMA sort of stuff that I'm learning in the class that I'm currently taking, which is 7 to 11 a couple times a week after I commute to the city. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe. Don't knock yourself, Travis. That was very persuasive.
Could anybody provide a ballpark estimate of how much our taxes would increase if we had to pay for fire?
I mean,
that's like Westchester County taxes, right?
I would say I live in a fire district. It's all relative, but it costs $1,000 to our family or our household living in that district. It's north of that, but it's roughly around $1,000.
So I remain, I actually, I'm going to be eloquent, and I can not always am. Remain enormously appreciative of all the information, and still also, as president of the board, am committed to a deliberative process in which, lots of people, both sides, or not that there's two sides, but in which all members of the community at least have the opportunity to comment on this. And given the timing of this, that's not possible. And so I actually do, very much appreciate, really very much appreciating the points that people have made, really appreciating the point that Maggie made, and still, again, going back to the responsible, responsive, and especially after hearing Travis speak, feel even sort of more comfortable with the idea of modifying what we have in the resolution to 2 years of service. And I said 2 years and 5%, 2 years and 5% for a first year, with the plan to begin to examine this really very carefully once we have, because once we collect taxes in the fall, which gives us plenty of time to discuss potentially changing it, which I think in this moment, that's how board members feel. It's a long time between now and 6 months from now, but I still feel like that is again, a responsive and a prudent approach. And believing that as urgent as the members of the volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers have been, as persuasive as they have been, also do feel like 1 year won't be catastrophic. I feel like it's responsible to both parties, and I feel like that's our role.
Agreed. I think catastrophic is the wrong word. There's going to be a net benefit change for a year.
Yes.
And I think actually the net benefit, the significant net benefit, is you're going to have more people who come out who are currently members who are going to work to become eligible members over the course of the year. And that's from our flow. It'd be interesting to know what our flow through of new residents moving to, or people who have not considered the fire company before, but this would be a recruiting tool to get them in. That would be an interesting thing to think about. But I think that the true fiscal change over the course of this first year, and perhaps over the course of the first couple of years, will not be net new people coming in. I like Travis's point about retention after the first year, through the first year. I think that's really important. But it will be the re-engagement of the current volunteer corps, because there's an incentive to do so. And I think we want to understand what that looks like. I think it'll increase and it'll plateau. I think Kristen made a good point. Even if it does increase and 50 people are now eligible because they've met all the points across the year, it's probably not going to be a huge amount of money, but I think we owe it to the people who are not here, who will be paying that cost, to understand what it is.
So for the people who are not here, are we going to put out notices and try to get them to come to the next time?
I think it's reported on in the paper. I think anybody who would like to encourage people to come could write a letter. I think, I hope actually, I think one of the things we can plan to do would be, to begin discussing it early in the year. I think that's a commitment we can make that would then allow the opportunity to do that. Yes, would you, go to the mic, please, thank you.
I just wanted to clarify something about recruiting versus retention. If we retain or bring members back in that are currently not making their points, we gain 2 firefighters. It takes 3 to 5 years to fully qualify somebody as an interior firefighter. What does that look like on the ground? I'll give you the last 4 or 5 calls we've done. I drove a fire engine to a call 2 days ago. I've been a driver for 2 months. It takes more than 5 years to grow a driver. I've been rushed through that process because I'm older. I'm a 55-year-old interior firefighter. How much longer can I do that, right? So now I'm driving a truck. I got less than 3 years on the job. Jeff Amato right there was sitting in the front right seat. He's not an officer. He just happened to be available. He has the same amount of time as I do, 3 years, right? So it's me and Jeff, and then we had a probationary firefighter, Charlie Brooks, right there. We were the 3 firefighters that responded. We only had 7 years of experience between the 3 of us. Imagine if we had to get to that scene and then go in and do a primary search of a floor of a building to pull somebody out, like our chief did just last month. You all know that, right? It happens. And we have, every time we get a call, we have to, in our mind, if it's an automatic fire alarm, it has to be a real fire. And we knew there was a gap. We have a 5-year gap between a member that just moved to DC and the year group that Lieutenant Fife, who just spoke, Travis. 5 years that not a single new member joined the company that stayed. And then over the past 3 years, we've gained 7 members, but only 3 of us are qualified interior firefighters that are off probation and still in that training pipeline. We're not considered fully qualified yet. We have a lot of inexperienced people right now that are showing up. Because we're not alone in this, us, North Highlands, Garrison, and Continental Village over a year ago created the Phillipstown Fire Coalition. We now do joint recruiting and retention efforts. This year is the first year that we have a full-blown recruiting campaign. We intend to recruit at major events in the area, incentivize every aspect of coming in and at least giving it a shot, knowing that for every 3 firefighters who say, yeah, I'll do it, maybe we get one person who starts to show up for a bit. And they're most unlikely not to go through the training that Travis mentioned. We absolutely cannot wait another year. And I know your point, I get it, right? I understand the position you're in. I have an enormous amount of experience in working complex problems at, at a very high level with a lot of money and people not in the room
Me
represent
too.
themselves, right? So I understand, but my analysis of the fire company right now in this district is that we don't have the time to wait an additional year. We need to have the max incentive now in order to make an impact. And we can what if the results of that all we want, but the fact on the ground right now today is that you're not getting experienced firefighters responding to your calls. You're getting us having to make a decision to respond and put ourselves at risk because we're unstaffed or understaffed. We will roll our truck with 2 people on board if we think there might be somebody who shows up like a chief officer on the scene. We did that last week. There was 2 of us in the truck, including myself. And we had our chief, Matt Stelz, right there. Him and I got kitted up into a house to check out a carbon monoxide alarm going off. Sounds pretty, uneventful, but carbon monoxide is a deadly gas, right? So we put ourselves in those positions without the right staffing because we still have to provide a service to the community as volunteer firefighters. We desperately need to have a strong recruiting year this year. We currently have 0 new volunteers going into the 2024 training cycle. 0. Not a single one. If we don't get a volunteer soon, they will not enter early enough to be trained this year. They won't go into the training cycle until next year. There's a whole presentation I can give you on the training cycles and how this all fits with this timeline. This right here, this time of the year, is critical for us to have that full incentive. It's something we need to market and advertise with our joint Phillipstown Fire recruiting operation. You can check out our website, phillipstownfire.org. It has a bunch of details in there.
Thank you. It's very persuasive. I mean, I think if someone has, people still have comments. You raise your hand. You're welcome to walk to the mic and make a comment.
So my name's Joe Hyatt. I'm the current president of North Islands Fire Department. Aaron just mentioned the recruitment committee that we started last year. And when we started this committee, we wanted to come with these numbers to figure out what we were retaining as far as members. And I just want to let everybody know, I looked back 10 years in our membership. We took in 42 members in 10 years. We kept 4. I don't know if, I'm hoping this will help us keep more people, but keeping 4 members out of 42 over 10 years is not the way that the fire service needs to be. It needs to continually keep members, not lose them. And again, I'm hoping that, consider the 10 and 2, and it may very well help us keep, more of those members. Now, you're not going to keep all 100% of them. You never will. But we need to keep more than, 4.
Joe, majority of those guys live in the district still?
There's a lot of them that still do, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just for multiple reasons of, not being able to afford, taking 2 jobs.
The time.
A lot of things, change. But this hopefully would help.
I'm deeply appreciative of the commitment and definitely appreciate the passion as well. I personally feel, I still believe, starting with a more aggressive, but still not full movement is the best way to go, but I'm one voice, and so I'm definitely looking for the voices of others because we need to arrive to some agreement so that we can actually change the wording of the resolution as it's written so that we can act on it later. And we could do that, I mean, we could do that later on, right? But then that requires that everybody stay through the meeting the rest of the meeting, which seems unnecessary. Our guests may not want to stay for the rest of the meeting. I mean, do you think that that's an okay way to go ahead and have this discussion now?
Absolutely.
I mean, normally sort of the finagling of the wording of the resolutions would come once we have a motion to do that. But I think out of fairness to the folks that are here, so that we can draw this to a close and then move on with the rest of the hearing, that's something that we should do now.
Well, let's start with a motion.
Well, we're not really talking about a motion yet. We're really talking about what we're really sort of having a conversation so that we know how to inform Megan for revising the language in the resolution when the time comes for us to act on it.
I think the board left off in its discussion, and this is anecdotal, so correct
So
me
to
on
the-
this, of
it's-
lowering the years
To
threshold to 2 and increasing the exemption to 5%. And there
Yes.
seemed to be some agreement. That's a very informal assessment, but around doing that, I hear you
Right.
asking if
There
there's
was-
any further discussion on that we should have it.
Yeah. But also some movement that we go ahead and go to the full 2 and 10. And so that's really where, and so I guess a straw poll is sort of what we're talking about at this point.
I'll join it. I'm at 2 and 5.
Okay.
Just because I want to see what happens.
Okay.
And frankly, to your point, I think we do a tax impact calculation of
Everything.
for budget. Maybe we do this for impact of this. If that's the intent, if the intent is, as I believe, or if I'm trying to channel other taxpayers who would say, okay, the shift is X much on my total taxes, that's fine. Let's make it transparent. And let's put it out there for the next vote. And I fully expect everybody to say fine. You never know. There'll always be people who vote no. But if we're talking about bringing voice to people who are not here, we have a lot of people who are here who are very interested because there's a lot of interest in maintaining a vibrant volunteer fire company. There's making sure that we continue to be able to staff trucks. I totally get the engaging members who are less engaged to deliver 2 firefighters on a truck. Totally get that. So reinvigorating the current core as well as bringing in new members. Totally get all that. But the people who didn't turn out are the people who will be impacted by this. And if we want to make that visible, let's make it visible and let them have their, and if anybody turns out, great. Nobody does, fine.
No.
I think it's a negligible reality. So I think the dollar figures are negligible, and I'm sure Catherine will, she won't be happy with me saying that, but I'm sure there's real numbers, right? But I think it's more of a semantic conversation. I don't know. I'm fine.
It's not semantic. It's
I
very
think it is.
explicit. It's 2
Well-
and 5 or it's 2 and 10.
Yeah, but you're talking a 5% difference. So it's 5. I'm totally fine. 5 and 2, sure. I'm good with 10 and 2. Okay. But if we want to start with 5 and 2, then gavel it in.
All right. Sean?
We have 3 people that are at 2 and 5.
It's still,
I'm very aligned with Ezra here in that I feel like today we could walk away at 2 and 10, and the impact to the district would be, as you say, negligible.
The impact to the district is
we don't know
nothing.
that.
nothing.
Correct.
Excuse me. When I say the district, let me say the folks who support this district, the taxpayers.
Yeah.
So I apologize.
That's
Thank you
what
for
it
that.
is.
But the only thing that is, I think, keeping me in 2 and 5 is my respect for leadership, and also that we are also exploring an incremental increase or decrease, I should say, with another large, tax-paying block. And we seem to
Right.
be approaching that way with a certain amount of information, and there is to my mind, there is a kind of equitable way of moving forward in these things that would speak to us. If we're going to act this way, we should act this way with all of our taxpayers who could get a meaningful decrease. So I would absolutely say yes to 2 and 5 today. It would not take much to persuade me to go to 2 and 10. But like I said, those things combined, I will follow your lead on it, Peggy, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I respect leadership too, but I'm at 2 and 10. I
knew that.
One thing I want to say, and we can't. This doesn't help settle anything, but we had the opportunity to talk about this last year. It just never came to the surface.
I didn't.
and that
I
was sort
wasn't
of-
even aware of it.
And then this is sort of irritating, the fact that we had to invite the entity here to give us information that we should have had probably a year ago, right? Or at least ongoing. So, and that I'm not, I don't know, that's not trying to lay blame anywhere. But it just because it's rushed, it's stressful. We got people looking at us. But I just, I think it's.
Right. I mean, to put it in context, we've had, I don't know, do you want to put it in
I
context?
just want to clarify one thing, that none of the individuals who are here were invited to provide information. Aaron and I spoke. Obviously, it's relevant to the group, and he indicated that he was going to provide public comment on it, but there was no intention to have any of the service individuals here this evening to provide information. They ended up doing that. But it was not the administration's request that they do so. Aaron had reached out a couple weeks ago, indicated he wanted to provide comment on it in representation of the group. He's done so several times over, but there was no request made to provide info.
I
just want to
Yeah,
make
no,
sure
I'm not. But
upfront about
again, this is sort of a big decision, and I feel like we haven't had the information, and I've asked. The board has asked a couple meetings ago for the number, and I feel like, and I understand that there was a dialogue between the district and the town, and I never heard what the resolution was between, or what the result was of that meeting in terms of the impact or coming down to a number that we could help kind of make the decision. So it just.
Well, I think my memory of how this happened is this happened one meeting ago. There's been a lot of, I guess, I hope you will disagree with me if anything you say, if I'm misrepresenting anything. I think the first time this was possible was last year.
Correct.
We had a significant change in the administration of our business office, and there were many things going on. I think it's, while not ideal, certainly for this group, I think it's allowable and understandable that not everything would happen right away as expected. I think it was brought to us for whatever reasons, it was something that we considered at the last meeting, and I do really think that Phil and Catherine have done due diligence in trying to get this information the way we understood it, which apparently may not have been an accurate reflection of reality, was that it was going to be very difficult to get that information. And so, again, a short timeline, not as much information as we would have liked to have had.
Yeah,
Does
just a
that seem
couple points
fair?
of clarification,
Okay,
and I
good,
want to
thanks.
try to be deliberate in that, as John had said, this is a new, regardless, the board's prepared to do something this evening that does not currently exist,
Right.
which I think is a good thing, not only for the individual, and I'm speaking as not a formal member of the board, obviously, but just as a member of the community who's observed the process for a while, but is a good thing that currently isn't in place, and the board wanted to do something for the volunteer workers. Going back to last year, and I don't think and the last thing I want to come away with is any stress in any relationship between a group within the community, myself, or anything, because I think it's a good thing, what we're trying to do. Last year, the exemptions were made available on a very limited timeline. I would not, just in hindsight or reflection, qualify us not taking action on it as a basis of having anyone new in the business office.
good.
More so, seeing districts that were moving forward with the exemptions without having any idea of what the tax impact
Thank
or
you.
redistribution would be.
Yeah.
And I know it may not be popular, but I'm trying to be consistent
Yeah.
along with the other leaders in our district to not take action on items where we cannot provide a detailed level of information around what the tax impact would be, or in this case, the tax shift would be. So in this particular case, we're not able to, or we weren't able to. That being said, the senior exemption, just not to switch topics, every district that's adopted it, including ours tonight, because I believe that we will, there's no understanding of what the tax redistribution is going to be. And it's likely to be more symbolic. And so again, we do the best that we can with the information that we have, but the information isn't always readily available.
Yeah.
I did meet with the town. I believe I've kept the board fully informed of the meetings I've had on this matter with the town through our Friday report mechanism. The town had indicated when we met with them that they shared the information about volunteerism or numbers in the community. It was the figure that Catherine had shared this evening. It is obviously not accurate in terms of how many individuals would be eligible for the benefit. I think that is somewhat cleared through discussion tonight, but the figure that we had is likely more of a figure of total number of individuals registered. So as far as additional information, the board was provided with the resolutions 2 weeks ago. We notified the community that this was under consideration.
And we have heard nothing.
And we have heard nothing.
Yeah.
The only conversation I've had regarding it is with Aaron, when he said, I plan to come to the meeting to make a statement. And I said, I look forward to meeting you there.
Yeah.
That's it. There was no other information shared from the fire departments with us, and I'm not saying that we asked for it. It was not provided, or it was not volunteered. Wrong term. It was not offered. We did not ask for it. So we have what we have in front of us. I understand that the firefighters want the full exemption, of course. I understand that the board wants information. I certainly will be reflective of what I could have done differently to have put you in a better position to operate on it.
Yeah.
But I think we're getting to the point, as Peggy, as you said, we just need to know for the folks that are here, for the community, what do we wish to do?
Yeah, and actually, I mean, I think my comments were meant, and I maybe should have addressed them to Maggie. I do feel like there has been due diligence. I do feel like, I think this is a new process. I think that maybe, I'll stick with my statement that I think that this was a new process and we were maybe being somewhat thoughtful in pursuing it, but I don't think we're at this point because there was a lack of due diligence in people pursuing these avenues. And I feel like, without diminishing in any way a deep amount of gratitude to the volunteer volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers, with a deep appreciation for the comments that people have made. The resolution that I think we'll put forward is for the 2 years of service and a recognition of really wanting to recognize people as soon as possible, and an initial exemption of 5% with a plan to pursue it in next year. So I think that's how we'll need to change the resolution when we get to it.
Agreed.
Okay.
And then I think when we get to this again, hopefully a little bit earlier in the year, I think we should, let's do all the due diligence. Let's do change in eligibility. Like, how many people have now, re-engaged? What's changed in recruiting? What's the overall tax impact? And make that transparent to the public.
Yeah.
And then we have, let's have a little, this is where we are.
Because we would have you would need to have a public hearing.
If we're going to change it?
Yeah,
Yes.
we would have a
we'd
public hearing.
We haven't even talked about eligible ambulance corps members, which I have no idea. So I'm sure somebody does, but
Yeah.
not many.
Yeah.
How do you
But
find
still,
eligibility?
yeah.
All that sort of stuff, right?
Right.
So
Okay. So at this point,
You got to close the.
yeah, no, I am. I'm actually looking just for so at this point, I'm going to conclude the public hearing. I believe that all attendees who desired to speak have been heard. I'm opening one more opportunity for there to be that. Yep, so I'm closing the public hearing. And so you all are welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but you're also free to go. We're at item F on the agenda, and the resolution comes at agenda item M. if that matters.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, thanks very much.
Thank you. That's right. As folks make their way out, just Christine, if you
Yeah,
can.
sure, sure, sure.
Oh, you're already there.
So we're now moving to the next item on the agenda, which is the elementary school visit and detail report. Principal Jammin, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. All right. Great. The clicker works, Megan. All right, thank you. So first I want to start recognizing, as did Peggy and Phil, that it was a pleasure to have both of you visit the elementary school. It was exciting to have you see our students engaged in problem solving, small group work, see the literacy work that we've been spending so much time talking about over the last year and a half actually in action. The new math resource that we adopted in the spring, you guys both got to see some math classrooms and see that used, including in my current board report, separate from my detail report, I had mentioned that our teachers had a chance to do some after-school staff development on how to use the NWEA in conjunction with the Khan Academy and MAP Accelerator.
Yeah.
And I know at least with Peggy's classroom, what she got to see a small group that was engaged in some of that directed work that was in place in one of our second grade classrooms, which is exciting. And then John was able to see our foreign language at least begin in fourth grade and see that initiative, which started just this year, our foreign language exploratory, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. So it was just good to see so much of what we talked about in a short period of time and brief glimpses, but we've spent a lot of time talking about those things. So it was good to have you there, and you are welcome whenever you would like. So our mission is we're committed to ensuring that our students are healthy, safe, supported, challenged, and engaged. I believe you saw that, and we'll talk about ways that we are working on that this school year. So our first building goal that I will focus on is on student engagement opportunities at the elementary school level. So that was our first goal for the year. And these are some of the ways that we are really trying to increase the discussion around engagement and get our kids more engaged in school. With our school climate survey, one of the things that was different within that engagement category at the elementary level in particular, I won't speak to middle or high school, I've certainly spent most of my time looking at the elementary data, is the question around how often students talk about what they learn at school when they are home, and bringing it home is one more different than the other categories and questions. So some of the things that we've been talking about are that foreign language exploratory and expanding that to elementary school. So the form that takes right now, and it may change next year, especially with the change in scheduling and how shared staff are available, but the structure that works currently with our current schedule is in third grade, our classes have a 10-week rotation. So each of the 3 classes has a trimester where our foreign language teacher is pushing into those classes during extended learning time, which I'm going to focus on specifically in a moment, and doing a connection with their social studies curriculum, which in third grade is countries around the world. So, for example, I'm going to talk about more in a second, so we'll talk about that. We have reading and STEM buddies, where our older students are reading and doing STEAM projects with our younger students, and hoping, seeing that then they enjoy teaching the younger kids and engaging with them around what they're learning in their classes and bringing it down to younger kids and teaching them. We've continued our Think Ahead chess program. That took a little bit of a hiatus with COVID because of our limitation on visitors and just the feasibility of being able to do chess with an outside organization in small groups when we were 6-foot distance or trying to be outdoors did not work well. But after the 2 years where we had those limitations, we did bring it back. So we are now at 2 full years of having chess brought back into grades 2 through 5. Again, that program is a 10-week rotation where it rotates through our second through 5th grade classrooms. We have some clubs that are going to be starting in the spring. Previous years, I can't speak to before my time, but in my first year, we had the only club at the elementary was yearbook, and our student participation in yearbook has decreased. And now at this point, it's mostly a adult-run program. My first year, there was some student picture taking, some student development. That hasn't been the last few years, again, with COVID and everything else, and then it just has not started back up. But in the spring, we are looking to have an art club, a check and connect club, and a cheer club. So more to come out on those, and trying to get our students' outside interests brought into school, and then also the things they're learning in school brought out of school, and increase those conversations. Engagement is one of the criteria that we are including when we're evaluating our student resources. So when we looked at the math resources that we were evaluating over the year and a half prior to this year, engagement was one of the things that we really looked at. And when we met with the other schools that were piloting the 2 final programs we were looking at, talking to those teachers about what they saw with how the students engaged with the materials was a big factor in why we chose Eureka Squared. And it would continue to be a factor as we look at other resources. And then we continue with are trying to increase our project-based learning and authentic learning opportunities for our students, because we see that those really do increase those conversations and engagement in the work and the learning. So extended learning time is, when I was reviewing, I was out when Ms. Sniffen did her building presentation, and I was unable to attend Mary Ann's. But one thing that I had noticed about your questions and the discussion that occurred after those presentations was a discussion of how the middle school and the high school use 10th period. And we do not have 10th period at the elementary school, but we do have extended learning time. And I realized we haven't ever really talked about that within my discussions with you as a board. So extended learning time is a 30-minute block within the day that is not designated as initial core instruction. So we have our 90-minute ELA block, we have our hour math block, we have our science and our social studies time, we have phonics and word work within phonics in K2, word work in 3-5, but we have an additional half hour that's set aside that is not initial instruction. And these are the variety of ways that we have been really working on using that time, especially thinking about it over this year for our students. For some of our students, it is when they get their related services and their academic intervention. That way they aren't missing initial instruction and having to, when they're already struggling with a topic, then make up that learning at another time, or to go home and have homework or assignments that don't make sense to them. So we do, as much as possible, try to schedule those services during the extended learning time. It's when our 3rd graders are doing foreign language for their 10 weeks. So an example on the left is Ms. Satterley's class. They were learning about Spanish-speaking countries in their social studies block. And then during the foreign language exploratory, they were learning about some cultural and language experiences within those Spanish-speaking countries. So there, in that picture, they are learning salsa dancing during ELT time to connect between the foreign language and the social studies. We have book clubs running in different classrooms. Some of them are cross-grade level reading buddy book clubs, and then some of them are, you may have a class where you have a group of really high-level readers that are reading above their grade level, and they may be reading a book that's a challenge book to then extend and push their reading level. Or on the other end, you may be having a group of students that's struggling and making sure that they have work that is not just looking at decoding and not just looking at those reading skills, but also finding some books that they can engage with and develop a love of reading and have a book club and have those discussions. Students are doing passion projects, STEAM challenges. They're doing coding in 5th grade during that time, where they're coding both robots, which I think Peggy got to see some of our robot coding, but also coding and building within a virtual world, not just with the robots. They'll be doing challenging work when you have students that are above grade level or above in a particular skill, and like I mentioned with reading clubs, but that also happens with math groups. We have a group of fourth graders right now that are designing their own car and then determining how much it would cost if they were going to build it, and so they're researching and then doing the math behind how they would be. I've seen some of their designs. It's a car I think I'd like, but I don't think I'll ever afford. And then it's also a time for creative writing. We won't watch it now, but on your own, the third graders started in their literacy block right now is around persuasive writing. And so their persuasive paragraphs were on what I should do to fix the playground and what they saw as the different problems and barriers to them having a good time at recess. And one of the essays that they wrote was around how I needed to fix the behavior of our secondary students and the fact that they keep twisting up the swings, and when the older kids twist up the swings, they are too high for them to untwist them, and then there are fewer swings for the kids to use. And I said, you know, I've been a principal a little while, and I think if I go to all the middle school classrooms and the high school classrooms and I say, everybody, you need to stop twisting the swings, no one is going to listen to me. So we need a different plan. And so the plan they created is the video that you can watch that we are going to be working with the middle school and high school teachers to show to the high school students. You want to see it right now?
Of course I want to see it.
I think you can click on it.
How long?
It's like 2 minutes.
Okay, great.
It will not extend this meeting extensively.
Recess should be fun, and it usually is. But sadly, elementary recess is not always fun. Big kids, please help us enjoy our recess by keeping the swings the way they should be. Let's all treat each other the way we want to be treated, with kindness, consideration, and respect. We're counting on you.
They wanted the copyright in there. I'm not sure whether it's officially and legally copyrighted, but exactly, there it is. So that's a project they spent about 2 weeks writing a script, designing, filming, setting it up, and then editing and inserting their music. So they get things that they're passionate about, and then they're learning how to advocate for themselves too, which just one example of many of the things we're working on as we think about engagement. Oh, I think, no, we don't want to watch it a second time. I love them, and 2 times is too much. Oh, no, but still, you might need to click on the next slide.
Recess should be fun.
Perfect. So the second goal that we had for this year is supporting teachers in the systemic use of data for intervention and progress monitoring. We had a November conference day with NWEA, and I think you heard about that from the other two buildings as well. That was a K through 12 initiative. And that was looking at the new reports and ensuring that all of our teachers, because we've had new staff since the last time that NWEA came in and did the training, and there's new reports within NWEA, so ensuring that everybody had common language and a good understanding of what reports are available. Over the last year, we have written and implemented the new updated Haldane literacy profile, which we'll get to in the next couple of slides. I think you'll be able to see how that rolls out. So what the literacy profile is a quantification of what literacy skills we're saying kids should have at the beginning of kindergarten, the middle of kindergarten, the end of kindergarten, and then up through 5th grade, along with what assessments we're asking teachers to do in addition to NWEA. And then with those assessments, if there is a concern that comes out of that data, the follow-up assessments that we would recommend to dig into what's going on with that particular student. So it might say, students should have these blends for these letters by this time. This is the assessment that we would do with all kindergarten or 1st graders in January to see if they do. And then if that data shows you that they're missing one and you don't know what's going on, it's not obvious from the data why they are missing that, here are some additional assessments you could do to dig in further and figure out what's going on with that child. So that literacy profile is in addition and on top of the NWEA and separate from the assessments that are recommended through our curricular resources as well. We had professional development and work on focusing on small group selection and intervention during our literacy PD with Megan Hargrave. So looking at how you can look at NWEA plus those HLP assessments to then really consciously group students on the skills you're looking and how to work with kids when we're designing those interventions. We did an ASSD, and that was on my board report just in January, of integrating the NWA data, the Khan Academy, and the MAP Accelerator in grades 2 through 5 so that we can have individualized math assessments and work for our students within our math curriculum. And then we're continuing the data team work that we started working on last year to make sure that we have both student data team work and grade level data team work, but also are taking a step back and looking at building data and making sure that we are doing what we need to there too.
If you don't
Yeah.
mind, one of the things there were the number of things that were really cool about going to the elementary school after not being in the having kids in the elementary school for a while. But one of the really interesting things that you talked through when we were sitting was how different testing leads to more specifics.
Yes, and I think when we get to the next slide, you'll be able to see that.
Great. That was really useful for me to understand.
Yes. So when we look at the literacy focus we've had, especially for data over the last couple of years, we are continuing our work to ensure that our literacy instruction is aligned with science of reading practices. I would say that really started not last year, but the year before, as we looked at selecting a literacy professional developer to come in and ensure that we were doing our due diligence to make sure that our practices stayed up to date. Our teachers were attending professional development, and then making sure that all of our staff were getting good information brought back to them, so it wasn't just teachers who were going out, but also that we were bringing that back and sharing it with everyone. So last year and this year, we have 10 days of focused grade level PD across the year. So each grade level, that becomes 3 half days that are focused on their grade level and their literacy strategies and their literacy data. We have 2 full days of staff PD with the Reading League due to a snow day. Our first day is actually tomorrow. It was supposed to be before the break, but our first day is tomorrow. Our next one will be March 19th. And right now we have 18 teachers that are enrolled in the SUNY New Paltz micro credential in reading. So that came out of some of the state's initiative around ensuring that the teachers across the state are still or are updated on the science of reading practices and what those best practices are, as well as what practices need to be removed from the classroom because they're just not shown to be as effective in teaching students reading. And so they've given a great deal of funding to the SUNY colleges to create coursework for teachers to take to make sure that we're on top of science of reading practices. So 18 of our teachers are enrolled in that. It's a 35-hour course that they are taking to get that micro-credential in reading.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
So when, 2 days of full staff PD with the reading league, will that be broken up by like grade bands, or is it a whole staff together?
So for tomorrow, we have an assembly coming in to do work with our 3 through 5 students for an hour in the morning, and then we have an alternative special schedule,
that's right, you said half
similar
days.
to what we did for the math professional development last year. So we have our clinicians doing a half an hour, I guess, additional special or additional, what we would call it. They're doing a instructional period on social emotional learning, and this week is Random Act of Kindness Week, so connecting kindness and how we treat each other in social emotional learning. So our clinicians are running 1/2 hour. Our special area teachers are each teaching music, art, or PE for a half an hour. And then we have a half hour read aloud also connected to those themes of social emotional learning and kindness. So that gives us 2.5 hours with our 3rd through 5th graders where our students are doing something meaningful and our teachers are able to attend the professional development. So 3 through 5 are going in the morning and K through 2 are going in the afternoon. And then we're doing that again with a different focus to the work, but similar structure to the day on the 19th.
That was even a better answer to my question. The question was really about the PD, but the idea of how do you provide PD within teachers' contractual hours to make sure that they're there and they're
And we're
well
not just showing a
compensated
movie for the 2.5
and
hours.
no, but
or calling
and
a
also
half day.
spending and also really finding ways to provide really meaningful work for students. That's a real accomplishment. Yeah.
So during our building visit, what came up was John's question of, all right, so what does that look like? So we won't get into specifics of what group of students or any of that because we're small and I don't want things to become identifying. But this is the sample of what a 2nd grade classroom could look like at Haldane with our student data. And blue is achieving above grade level. Green is achieving within that just at grade level, just above, and then the yellow is your 50%, your average student, so it's actually 41 to 60. So yellow starts to feel that like negative, but that's right where your average 2nd grader should be. And then orange would be at or approaching grade level, and then red would be below grade level. So this particular snapshot of students would have nobody who was below grade level. And that's not uncommon. This is a snapshot of what the NWA, when you click on one of those students, looks like. So this shows you fall, winter, and spring, and then the following year, fall, winter, spring, and then fall and winter because we have not yet had a spring. And this particular student is bouncing right around that average. The dotted line is your 50%, your right in the middle child. So this is not a student that would raise concerns or red flags or necessarily tell us that we would provide any extensive intervention. Certainly we want all of our students to be growing and there would be small group work on what this child's strengths and weaknesses were, but it wouldn't be a student that has red flags. This is that same class, and this, do I have a pointer? I do. Oh, you can't really see it, it's green. All right, so NWA fluency is the data that you were just looking at. So that first columns over there, the phonological awareness, phonics word recognition, language comprehension, are the data that would have been pulled from those reports that we just saw. And again, this is all color-coded by above and below grade level, so we would not see any students there that we are concerned about.
Each row is a child.
That, the NWA is all of those pulled together.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this
but
is
like
broken out.
182 going across is one
One
kid.
student, yep,
178,
one
okay,
child.
yep,
Yes,
great,
I've cut
thank you.
off the names
Yep,
and
yeah, no, great, thank you.
unalphabetized them and all of that stuff, but yes. Now, all right, NWA math is a different thing, but where you see on the right the color-coded boxes for NWF and ORF, those are your nonsense word fluency and your oral reading fluency. And those are two assessments that were put in place because of science of reading research that our teachers had done last year and the year before, and advocated to be included in that Haldane literacy profile. And so now they are assessments that we are doing at the elementary in full force this year, new because of the teachers' work on the HLP last year. And as you can see, it doesn't look as rosy in your oral reading fluency and your nonsense word fluency, which is what Peggy brought up at the visit. And that's where a lot of the science of reading information is, that your NWEA and your curriculum and the way that we've assessed and taught reading does not always actually tell you, it doesn't necessarily teach in the way that we need to, and it doesn't give us the information we need to fix it. So the oral reading fluency and the nonsense word reading fluency gives you a lot more. So then that student on the bottom is the same student we just saw in this profile here.
That was so interesting, because when you said to this, like, I don't see anything that makes me worry there, I was like, that student does make me worry. But that's
it
because
wouldn't be
I've
a red
looked at
flag, 'cause-
thousands of students of
Because
reading.
yellow is
reading.
your average student, right? So that's
Yes.
where we would expect them to be.
Yeah.
And then over here, in the oral reading fluency for that student, it's all red. Which tells us there's actually an underlying reading concern that if we didn't use the science of reading practices and we didn't implement this, this child may have gone unknown, that there was an underlying reading issue. So then what's done for this child when we get to the classroom level and the student level data team and our building level data team is to say, this child actually does have a red flag that we need to intervene and need to do some different instruction with. And this would be that same group of students in the winter. So still red, but if you see, we went from 34 words, 7 words. The first one is sounds. So 34 sounds, 7 words, 22, to 48, 13, 47. So a much greater, there's growth.
Right. But that's a lot of change in just a couple of
Yes.
years, really talking about, because really what we've heard you all talking about is like using data, right? So really engaging in the sustained effort to use data, but not just use one kind of data, but to look at multiple kinds of data. And I mean, I think anybody who looked at that previous slide would see that it's a complicated and complex picture. And so I think that, to me, I see so much, I don't want to, openness to really advancing, openness to really working on developing new capacities, if that,
Yes,
I think
and
that's
I
a
would
fair
say
way to
that is, as a leader, I was not a elementary reading teacher, right? I've learned a great deal working in the elementary about elementary reading, but it's facilitating the time and getting the teachers who are doing the hardest work together and giving them the space to create and ensure that they have the time to have this information and that we have the time to work together and in groups to ensure that we're all able to do this for our kids.
So this is super granular. Do we
Yes.
ever, is there a way, do we see this like in the, as an assessment, is there a way like to back up from that and see this? Because this is when in other talks that we've had about, state test results and things like that, like
There is not a good way to make this a big picture. I mean, and that's, I think, the criticism within when you see just the state data or when you see the classroom data. This looks great, and there are a number of students in this class who are receiving interventions both at the classroom level and at the academic intervention service level that when you go too far out, you just don't see it because a child's weakness might be just in a specific area and it doesn't come out here. So I guess the best I could say is no, when we zoom out to state test data, or when we zoom out to building NWEA, Haldane is in a really good space and we should be really proud of that. And then just know that we are also doing this work to make sure that it isn't just, that student that's bouncing around average, or that student that's bouncing in the red zone, because we certainly have those students too, not in this particular grouping, but they're there too, that we're taking that look back and looking at it. And then what we do then when a child has an intervention is then they're getting additional assessments throughout their 6 to 8 week intervention to then determine, does that child need to stay for another 6 to 8 weeks? Did they close a gap? Do they shift from a pull out to a push in? And what is the information that we're collecting? And again, we're doing that with the DIBELS and the nationally normed assessments, not just relying on those broader picture assessments.
That's really cool, that you're like, and so the intervention will be like, what are the different types of interventions that you would?
So we have, so you have small group instruction within the classroom. So like you guys had mentioned, when you're visiting an elementary classroom, it's not, the teacher at the front of the room and all the kids are just sitting there looking at their desks. Often there's a period of time that may be like that, but then they're breaking into small groups, they're rotating around, they're getting individual instruction based on what that grouping needs, and those groups are made based on what the data is showing. And then we have ELT time, where the teacher could use that as additional time to say, all right, I had you in my regular class, and you rotated through groups, but I'm actually gonna do another thing with you during this ELT time. To pushing in, we have teaching assistants that push in to provide another small group. To then pulling out, which is where our interventionists, Ms. Saunders and Ms. Pastula, pull students out in small groups to deliver. There we have a range. So most of what our intervention is at this point is the PAF program that was adopted as a resource 2 years ago. We do still have some students that do well with LLI, but that is a really, it's not as well regarded as it once was, but there are some students where that approach is beneficial, and so it's used on a limited basis. Those are our two predominant pull-out programs.
And then this will be
This is within a PAF group.
Okay, administered within a PAF. Okay, cool.
Christine, is this the same student?
Same student.
Got it, that we've been talking about, that
Yep.
was on there. And can you just describe, you don't have to get into each, like what each assessment is, but it looks like this is a 3 to 4 month period of time. A series of probes or assessments were given, right?
So it's
to do what?
ORF is an oral reading fluency, and that's really what science of reading and the research has said is your best assessment to assess reading progress. Nonsense word fluency is a really good way within oral reading fluency, because it makes sure that they can actually decode the letters and to the sounds that they are, versus just recognizing a word. So using nonsense words, the NWF is your consonant letter sounds. So if a word was mick, and they said mip, they would get one of their consonant letter sounds because they got the M, but they didn't get the other. And then nonsense word is, did they get all of them together? So you can have more sounds than words.
And what are we seeing over the 3 month period of time from the intervention of the students?
Right, so this is a student where she started at, or he actually, at 78% and moved to 94% with her oral reading fluency, which then tells us that that intervention is working. Now that doesn't necessarily mean she would test out of academic intervention. It might mean that then we're moving to the next skill and we're moving up to something else. This might have been an intervention around blending letters. And then now that that's near mastered, we move on to vowel teams or another language skill, but you're gonna start with your more basic and move your way up. So this child, I would say, is now ready for whatever that next thing is for them.
This is awesome, Christina. I really do appreciate this. And we've talked about this before, whether, how useful is all the data that we collect? And you basically just said, here's the data we collected, here's the intervention we put in action because of the data we collected. These are the different interventions, and you've assessed how well that intervention worked.
And when it
It's
doesn't
literally
work, then
exactly what we
we
had
try
talked about.
something else.
You know, it's excellent. Yeah, really appreciate it.
And I don't wanna, beat the same drum all night, but I would say it's just a testament to our staff really staying on top of, yes, the state is now saying, like, science of reading, you must look at it. And we wouldn't be at this point if we hadn't started the year before last. You know, when Josh, myself, and our 2 reading interventionists went to the state webinar on the new literacy briefs that they released in January, so just a month ago, and they were there and they were saying, and oral reading fluency is really where we need our assessments to go. That's what we need to be doing. The iReadies and the NWAs and these ones that districts are using aren't giving you enough information. And we were able to say, like, yay, we already started that work. And I'm not going to say that we're where we need to get to. The road is long, but it makes me proud of our staff and the work that they have done, that we're not starting at the beginning of this road. We are on our path down the road.
Just one more question
Yeah.
before you dive off into the next.
No, go ahead.
I know we've talked a little bit about data teams over time. So could you just put this in context of what data teams do and how, like, the interaction?
Yeah, so our teachers start with this level here, right? We do the NWA in the fall. They do then get their baseline September or reading fluency and DIBELS information. And then we're able to, at the grade level, take a step back and say, all right, overall, like, where is the grade? Where are the students we're worried about? Who do we need to collect maybe more information on? And then when the teachers have collected that information, they either then go into their small groups in their classroom. Most likely they would go into their small groups in their classroom, try something, and then after that 6 weeks, if you have a student that's really struggling, they're not going to get to where they need to be, and you would then bring them to a student support team meeting. And that's where then we would look at it, and then look at it maybe compared to the whole grade, or look at it compared to our academic intervention service. I've lost the word, but we have our chart of how you qualify in and how you qualify out.
That MTSSR guidebook, very nice.
Thank you. So the thing, I didn't have that word right this second, but we would look at that and then see, do they qualify for a tier 2, and should we be moving them into a pull-out service? Would we want to up the tier 1 service that they're getting in the classroom first, and then look at that data and make a decision for that student. And then the building level team sits back and looks at, like, the building data. There's also another report that can show you growth versus achievement.
Yep.
And, do we have some kids that maybe have high achievement but low growth that didn't come out in these reports that we want to, go back to the teacher and say, hey, talk to us more about this, or can you tell us what's going on in this information? So trying to take that bigger picture. So the data teams, there's the individual teacher, there's grade levels,
Yep.
and then there's student support team, that's when we have the individual concern, and then the building level bigger.
So
look.
is it correct to say that a group will sort of sit with this initial snapshot and
A bigger
collectively-
snapshot than this,
Yes, but for
but
the
yes.
grade,
Mhm.
and take a look and say, okay, recommended actions,
Yes.
pros and cons, and here's some students we need to pay attention to. and
Correct.
this is-
So like we just did that with kindergarten in January,
Okay.
to then say, like, all right, where are the groupings we see across these grade levels? I would say kindergarten's a tricky one because they're just learning to read and they're a little bit more all over the place. The others were able to do it individually and then as a group too.
Thank you.
All right. So our last goal is the shortest one because I think it has not the least work, but I think the least visible work at this moment, in that our last goal was to support the district work on the campus master plan and the master scheduling, focusing on the elementary specific concerns. And I will say that right now, the elementary specific scheduling is important and moving along. The secondary scheduling is proving more complicated. So mostly my role has been brainstorming and helping and supporting, but it's making progress. So we reviewed the updated enrollment study that got done this fall and how that impacts our cohort data and size. Our faculty looked at the scheduling impacts. We actually have some meetings with PE and music this upcoming week to look at how that impacts K-12. Those are, music and PE being two really big shared staff, and also K-12 departments. And then just continuing to collaborate with the middle school, high school, and Dr. Benante on the campus master plan along with you. So our goal is to continue being supportive and work through it, and we are, but there's, I think, not a lot of visible work to put up on the slide in the same way that some of the others did.
Is that enrollment study a demographic study?
So it was updated. There was one, my first year, so 2019, there was a full extensive enrollment study, and then this fall, they updated it, including current birth rates and stuff. I would say it's not that different numbers-wise than
No, we
the initial one.
engaged the same organization to do an update to the previous enrollment study, just to, the further you get away, the perhaps less accurate the initial study becomes. So given that we were 5 years away, we updated that. There was no significant shift. And again, we wanted to make sure we addressed that, just given the level of planning we're doing, not just with scheduling, but with campus planning.
Yeah.
If there were, that should be incorporated into our campus plan, but our numbers look to be fairly consistent with what they have been.
On the scheduling point.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be interested, but so,
I'm interested in everything.
No. You wouldn't be interested in actually changing your schedule, the way that the kids are in the room. I've noticed that the extended learning time is excellent. Right?
Yeah.
So it allows a lot of variety of students. The way you run your building allows students of all different
No, that we would
abilities
be
to really
advocating
engage
to
it,
keep
yeah.
the extended learning time, to keep the structures of our actual time per subject area
Yeah.
is not what we would be proposing changing. At the elementary, it's shifting to that 6-day cycle that allows us to share staff more effectively. It'd be the increase to PE K2, the increase to library 3-5. Hopefully, I'm hopeful, especially seeing how the foreign language played out this year, that having a more efficient schedule lets us keep that in some format. Likely it would look different just with the way the schedule is, but to keep it in some fashion, at least in our fifth, hopefully extending into fourth or third if
Or drop
possible.
that lower, yeah.
Although like right now in fifth grade, it's once a week because that's just the only way it could work. So a different option might be a more frequent fifth grade, but then maybe eliminating the third or something like that. But looking at how we could keep foreign language exploratory at the elementary would be something that I'm hopeful for. And then you had another question I lost. Was there another piece?
Oh, that's good. I think you do well.
All right. So keeping all of those things, but shifting to that 6-day. Any other questions about, I can go back to anything.
I also really appreciated hearing about the extended learning time. It's such a smart way to think about how to create a point in time where you can accomplish so many different things, right? You can accomplish, academic intervention services. You can accomplish providing students with opportunities to engage in more, in projects or activities that are really aligned with what they want to do. It's an opportunity for students, like you said, who are sort of performing above grade level to have the support to do that. I mean, but it does also, it also aligns actually kind of with what we heard from the sophomores in talking about electives, right? There really is this desire on the part of the students themselves, as well as on the part of their parents and us, to really find as many ways as we can to, even as a small school, to provide students with the kinds of really enriching academic as well as social emotional, but academic opportunities that help them grow the most that they can, right? And you need spaces for that. You need resources for that you need. And anyway, I thought
And
was
it looks
great.
different every year. You know, a certain middle schooler, when they were in 4th grade, ELT, started their environmental and animal advocacy club that now they're moving into sustainability and things at the middle school. So, you know, it looks different for each of our groups of kids, but they come up with amazing ideas, and having that time to, I think it connects to a lot of our, you know, the seal of civic readiness work, you know, that they're advocating at a young age for something that's important to them. That skill certainly translates to middle school and high school, or they're developing a greater understanding about a math concept that was really interesting to them, like how they're going to design and build a car. You know, it gets them engaged, it gets them passionate, and then we keep their interest in learning.
I also really want to thank you for being so responsive on the requests that came up when John and I were in your office, right, and which has been this sort of ongoing interest of the board in understanding how the faculty is expanding its ability to use data, as well as how they are using data, and that I think that just was a really good example of the different levels, as well as the complexity of it, and also the growth that's taking place on the part of the faculty and staff.
They are doing a lot of work,
so thank you.
And even just like 18 of them signing up for this not required micro-credential just shows a real investment in their own learning and their commitment to doing the best for our kids, which is great.
You know, absolutely. No, I mean, I do really feel like the education field is at this real sort of tipping point when it comes to really understanding teaching reading. So it's great.
Awesome.
Can I say one thing too?
Absolutely.
Again, about the ELT, I'll be really brief about it.
No,
Just to
please.
say that I feel like it supports our commitment to inclusion, because oftentimes in other schools and other programs and other ways, oftentimes our kids with learning disabilities are pulled out. Oftentimes they're pulled out of preferred activities or things in which they might otherwise be enjoying themselves and building positive relationships with their peers. So that we have a dedicated time when we can do that means that those students can be fully integrated with their cohorts throughout the day in a more meaningful way. So
Yeah, and
I
not
think that's
missing and
not
falling
missing things.
behind in
Right.
ways that,
Yeah.
you know, if you have a weakness in OT, but now you got pulled out of reading, well, now you have a weakness in OT and you missed your reading class.
Right.
And if we can avoid that, it's
Right.
much better for
Right,
everybody.
and then also, what student wants to miss special?
That's right.
Who wants to miss special?
No one wants to miss
No.
special.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Well, 2.5 hours into the meeting, we're actually at our very first public comment period, which feels like it usually comes towards the beginning of a meeting. So we are at the first opportunity for additional communication from the public, which this is the opportunity we have at all of our meetings for people to speak. So the Haldane Board of Education desires and values input from the entire school community. This first public comment session is reserved for comments on special presentations, like we just had, and active agenda items. For those who wish to address the board, please sign in and state your name for the record. Please keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. Disparaging remarks and discussion of district personnel are strongly discouraged. Although we do not engage in dialogue, please know that we're listening, and we ask you to leave your contact information with our district clerk, Megan Shields, for prompt follow-up from either myself or Dr. Benante. All right. So now we're moving through our administrator information reports. Thanks very much to everyone who provided their reports, all of which are on board docs in the agenda.
If I may make one comment?
Yeah, of course.
Mrs. Sniffen, I know, wants to be here tonight. However, she's with our 2 students who are performing at the Poetry Out Loud competition in New
fun.
Paltz that you heard about
Neat.
earlier. That being said, I'd be remiss if I didn't just highlight Helen McCottman has been named as our valedictorian, and Amelia Cupper as our salutatorian. And congratulations to both of them and their families. It's a incredible accomplishment.
Yeah, that's great. No, we got a little highlight of it from the
Oh, that's right.
sophomores.
They did
and
mention that.
But I was really
I
like,
heard them say
I didn't know,
poetry out
how did
loud.
we not know that? But so I guess it must have just recently
Well,
happened.
the week prior to last?
Right before
Yeah,
spring break.
yeah.
Okay. All right, well, that's very exciting. Means we're approaching the end of the year if we're naming our valedictorian, our salutatorian. All right, now we are moving,
I did want to draw the board's attention within the PPS report as
Oh,
well,
okay,
just to
great.
some of the work that Dr. Cation and our team, our speech and language therapists, have been engaging around as it relates to speech therapy, which we really is part of our intervention model as well at the elementary levels. I would draw your attention to some of the additional information there that Regina has provided. Had we had a little more time tonight, maybe we would have spoken at length about it. That being said, there'll be time, I'm sure, in the future to do so. So if you haven't checked it out yet, please do.
Great, well, thank you.
Mhm.
So now, can I move to the consent agenda? Okay.
I have nothing else to
We
add.
don't usually stop for the information report, so, all right. Okay, moving into the consent agenda minutes. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Consent agenda financial. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Just one comment here that the board had previously acted on an agreement with Garrison for our PPS staff, which is Dr. Cation and Ms. Patinella, to provide support for their CPSE process. Upon review and in the advice of counsel, Mr. Lambert reviewed that agreement, and the board acted on it, but also felt it was in the best interest for the board to act on the recommendation for the distribution of the funds that are coming from Garrison to Haldane to be then distributed to Dr. Cation and Ms. Patinella for their services in that regard. So this finalizes that.
Right. Thank you for that additional information. So,
Actually.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is not related to the financing of that, but it is a question related to that process. Is this an okay time to ask?
Sure.
To what extent does Haldane bear the liability of those? Thank you.
Our agreement releases us of liability as it relates to, or any potential liability that would occur as a result of those those processes.
Those processes and those recommendations.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. And so moving to consent agenda personnel, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Do we have another Sassano?
Oh, yeah?
Do we?
Yeah, Ellie, substitute teacher.
Oh. That's very great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
More Sassanos the better, as far as I can tell.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. That was.
And we did the vote, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So moving to unfinished business, which is, so before Megan can read, I think we can do, go ahead and start with M1, which is the resolution to amend the senior citizen tax exemption. Okay, so, Ms. Shields, will you read the recommended action, please? Or how much of it do you need to read?
I'll read the beginning.
Okay.
Whereas Section 467 of the Real Property Tax Law provides for a partial exemption from taxation on residential property owned by qualified persons over 65 years of age, and whereas the Haldane Central School District Board of Education currently provides the exemption provisions of Section 467 of the Real Property Tax Law to such qualified persons, and whereas recently, per New York SB 3085, the income eligibility limits for persons qualifying for the exemption were increased, and whereas the Haldane Board of Education desires to amend its previous resolution to reflect the new income eligibility limits enacted under NYSB 3085, and whereas a public hearing was held on this matter on February 27th, 2024, and now therefore be it resolved that the Haldane Board of Education does hereby amend the income eligibility limits for the partial tax exemption previously authorized under Section 467 of the real property tax law in accordance with the schedule posted.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Is there any discussion regarding this before we move forward? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. So before we read the next resolution, I think there were a couple of changes, one of which, and Megan, I wasn't sure the best way to do it. It did seem like the language was missing specific information about which fire companies would need to,
We're gonna add within the Haldane Central School District,
just within the, okay.
after both mentions of the years, in the first two paragraphs, so to speak.
Okay, so have served, so if I'm looking at the second,
Fourth line, we're gonna add it after the number of years,
okay,
and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, to the 10th line, after the number of years,
okay,
I believe.
I think that makes
right?
sense, right. As well as revising the exemption to 5%
And 2 years.
and the number of years to 2 years. Okay, I just wanted to confirm that before you got started, because that's a lot of words to read. I think okay, may we have the recommended action, please?
Whereas pursuant to Real Property Tax Law, Section 466A, the Board of Education of the Haldane Central School District desires to offer a school tax exemption on the primary residence of eligible volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers residing within the school district and who have served a minimum of 2 years within the Haldane Central School District. And whereas a public hearing was held on this matter on February 27th, 2024, and therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby adopts the property tax exemption for eligible volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers, permitting residential property exemptions of 5% for eligible volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers residing within the Haldane Central School District and who have served a minimum of 2 years within the Haldane Central School District. And be it further resolved that pursuant to Real Property Tax Law, Section 466A, the Haldane Board of Education shall provide a lifetime property tax exemption of 10% on the primary residence of eligible volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers with 20 years of service within the school district and who maintain their primary residence within the same school district. And be it further resolved that the Haldane Board of Education shall provide a property tax exemption of 3% to eligible unremarried spouses of deceased eligible volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers, subject to the requirements of Real Property Tax Law, Section 466A. And be it further resolved that the Haldane Board of Education shall provide a property tax exemption of 10% to eligible unremarried spouses of deceased eligible volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers who died in the line of duty, subject to the requirements of Real Property Tax Law, Section 466A. And be it further resolved that this local law shall be effective July 1, 2024, available to eligible volunteer firefighter and volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers for the 2024-2025 school year.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Yeah.
I think that
What?
one number should change.
Yes.
Oh, which
I
one?
think we should make the 3% in the, yes, provide property tax exemption of 3% to eligible unremarried spouses of
Oh, okay,
deceased
you know, I
eligible-
wondered that as well. We didn't
should
talk
just
about, it, but that does make
we
sense
should
for it
just
to be the
align it.
same.
We should just, because
Should
it's,
align.
yeah.
Sorry, say that, so that they're aligned, right, so that it wouldn't happen
Yes.
You know, I saw that as we were going through, and I was like, oh, we didn't really talk about that, but that's a
Yes.
good point, and I don't have any, so,
I misspoke when I summarized at the front end of the meeting. I was citing the 10% exemption for those who had died in the line of duty. I don't think I said that.
Oh,
So-
okay.
Do you want me to reread that section?
Just that one section.
So again, changing that 3% to 5% to unremarried spouses. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, right, okay. Yes, please, Megan.
Be it further resolved that the Haldane Board of Education shall provide a property tax exemption of 5% to eligible unremarried spouses of deceased eligible volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers, subject to the requirements of the Real Property Tax Law, Section 466A.
Okay.
Yep.
And I already asked for the motion. We have a second. Is there anything else anybody wants to say? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. All right. Moving on to new business.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Take it
guys.
easy, guys.
Have a good night.
So moving on to new business, the CSE, CPSE recommendations. Maybe you have the recommended action, please?
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendations of the Committees on Special Education and Preschool Special Education as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And so now it is moving on to discussion of the, I guess, draft proposed calendar for the 24-25 school year.
Had no action on this item
Right.
tonight, but anticipate that there will be probably in a month's time or so. So the draft is here for the board's review. I'll just say a few things. We are looking to start with our staff prior to Labor Day. The calendar next year, we tried to honor a few things that then put pressure on other areas or in other areas of the calendar. So I'll just speak to them. One, we tried to include, or we included a midwinter recess, similar to what we had last week. That's in this calendar. Also, the Wednesday prior to Thanksgiving is always a day we typically have off. Many folks are traveling on that day, so that's included here. That being said, there's other state holidays or federal holidays that we have to honor. So Juneteenth, which is a fairly recent one, we have Juneteenth on the calendar this year. It's on next year's calendar as well as the Asian Lunar New Year in January 29th. So just considering all of those new days of observance along with the midwinter recess, we think we've done a good job, but that being said, if there's any changes that we wish to make, it's we're probably going to have to look to the midwinter recess to claim those days. So first day of school is scheduled for September 3rd as well.
Is it Asian Lunar New Year a new holiday? Did I miss that? Was it this year?
It will be for
It will be
Next
next year? Wow, all right.
It's probably too early to tell, but I'm just curious. It'd be good to get feedback on what, if any, impediment to the progress of learning the full winter break had,
Sure,
or
yeah.
what the impact might be. It's hard to know in one
Yes.
way or another. I mean, I know we had a great time at my house last week.
Right.
That was fine. But I'm curious to know, if there are any.
Yeah, we'll check in on that. The process is such that we will now send the calendar out to the community, to our parents and families. So that's to elicit further feedback that they may have on the draft calendar. And then our goal would be to present it to the board at the end of March for vote, considering any feedback that we may receive
Right.
between now and then.
Yeah. When we were talking about this in the agenda meeting, one of the things, we had February holiday for a long time. And then we got rid of it because students, it was back when we were having like a lot of snow. And you would have this situation where students would miss for MLK Day. Now you actually also have the Lunar New, but and all the snow days. And then to have that week was really deemed disruptive to learning, but that certainly hasn't been the case. So I think anyway, I mean, because I work with school districts all over the country, and it is really interesting the extent to which some folks have it, some folks don't, and yeah.
Especially with the option to go remote now.
Yeah, right. It does kind of, right.
We can grab the days from the calendar, or we can go remote. So we've indicated we would use remote days
After 3.
if necessary, yeah, after 3. So we still have one left.
Tracks mainly with the BOCES calendar, but not that break.
No.
Not that midwinter break. So what happens with our students there? And it's got to be common that other school districts, I know my school district is doing the full winter break, right?
So they would not attend BOCES, or they would have to attend on their own during that time.
Oh, because there's no transportation.
BOCES has indicated that their calendar may change.
Okay.
Again, they've adopted it, but they're still examining whether they could
there's
include
so
a
many
full
feeder schools
winter
that-
break, yes,
yeah.
because they know other school districts are doing so.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much to everyone for their work on that, and it's really clear that there is a lot that has to be balanced in getting in the requisite number of school days, starting around Labor Day, ending around, I mean, actually, so we still have students going through, the last full week of June, so thanks very much for that. So let's now move to the next agenda item, the nominee of our trustee to the Putnam Northern Westchester Board of, anyway, NW BOCES. I'm not going to say the whole thing. Will you please read the recommended action?
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby nominates Dr. James Ryan, residing at 43 Main Street, Cold Spring, New York, which is located within the Haldane Central School District, as candidate for election to be held on April 16th, 2024, to serve as trustee for the Putnam Northern Westchester Board of Cooperative Educational Services for a term beginning July 1, 2024 through June 30, 2027.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, actually, this came up in a conversation with Dr. Benante, but it's interesting, this will be the second year that Dr. Ryan will have been our trustee to the BOCES, and it might be interesting for us to sort of think about, like, what, he has a lot of experience. He was superintendent of that BOCES for a long time. He's been in the community for a long time. So I think it's actually in our interest, and it might be something we want to do, to actually think about how to engage with him more about his role. And that was not my idea. That was Dr. Benante's idea, but I think it's a really good one.
Well, Jim is a resident, obviously, and he's indicated that he would like to represent the community on the board. He's eligible to do so. Obviously, he has a intimate knowledge of BOCES, given his role there previously, but given that he's representing the Haldane community and has an interest in doing so, again, it would be prudent, whether it be at a leadership level or with the full board, of having some level of engagement.
Right.
Once or twice, and just to hear a little bit more about how that representation occurs with at the BOCES, because we do rely on them quite a bit for services. And I have no doubt that Dr. Ryan advocates on our behalf and really every district's behalf in his role there. But it would probably be helpful for the board to become a bit more attuned to that. And I know he's willing to. He's indicated that in his letter. What that looks like, though, I think can be shaped further by
No,
the board leadership.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And he's been an administrator in the region for, decades, and there's a lot of expertise, and, we're fortunate to potentially have access to that. So it's something we'll think about further, Maggie and I. So, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. So we're now to the second opportunity for communication from the public.
This might be a time for you to give them a question.
And do we have any board reflections?
I'd like to say one thing, and just about, us governing in public this evening, which is uncommon for us. It's not typically what we do. But I just wanted to say that, you know, ultimately, it's the five of us who make the decisions. It's the five of us who are responsible for the district. And I want to make it clear that I feel like the administration leadership goes above and beyond to make sure we have all the available information. I heard what you said about why didn't we know about this last year? You know, speaking as the president, it's my responsibility if I feel like something is going to come to the forefront that we elevate it. You know, it's just simply that one way or another that as the president I didn't see or I wasn't close enough to really highlight. And as the former president, I take full responsibility for any situation that they may put us in. I just want to, you know, be clear about that. You know, I'm just saying I feel really that is, you know, the case. But I just want to be clear in saying that I feel like we have all been acting in, I think, full transparency as we arrived here.
Sure.
And that I appreciate the due diligence that we've received, but I also understand that some things just pass through our.
Right. I mean, I guess, and I wish I would have, it would have been so helpful to have gotten all the input from them at an earlier time than this meeting. Like, and I don't know, I do feel like that the timeline was a real problem, but I do want to think about that, you know, it may be, I think there's a lot of things we're going to want to hear from the community about next year. And I've talked some about it, and I think this will be a topic, well, you know, once we have our retreat, but really beginning to find ways to at least make possible dialogue not at the last, you know, not at the last minute,
Yes.
you know. And I too, you know, they've left, but I feel like I did really learn a lot. I really appreciated all the comments and yet, yeah, I mean, we'll certainly say I'm doing my best. Like, that's one thing I'll say. And so appreciative of everything that we got from the district. You know, what we got from Catherine and Phil is exactly what we asked for. Exactly what we asked for was a modest initial step in this direction. What we heard from the community was a segment of the community that they felt like that wasn't enough. And I feel like we arrived at the best place that I knew how to help us arrive at for this evening.
You know, Peggy, I don't mind it. So many boards just gavel out and go to executive session. And they do that.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I'm actually not a huge fan of it. I think it's fine. It's fine. Either way is fine. Like, us having the conversation, it's a small community. I don't think we have to gavel out and go to executive session every time, you know?
It would be inappropriate for a board to go into executive
so, too.
session
Yeah.
on this topic. Like, this was
They
a
do it all the
conversation
time,
we
but
needed to have in
boards
public.
do it all the time,
Yeah.
and to me, it smacks of like ignoring open meetings laws, even though I think it's legal, but I'm not a big fan of that.
Yeah.
I think us having open dialogues are fine.
Yeah.
You know, I appreciate it,
Yeah.
actually, and I appreciated your leadership.
I
We're
did
allowed
too.
to disagree
Mm-hmm.
and still come to reasonable, ends. I think it was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate it.
Anything else?
I'm just gonna say that I think we heard some drama students earlier
Yes.
Oh,
coming in the window.
You did.
Their voices carry.
Their voices do carry, but I certainly appreciate all the parents who make the drama program work. It's just I've only been tangentially involved in minor set work, but there are people who spend days, not just like purely volunteer, and we know that the productions that they do are great, and so it's always super impressive, and like big shout out to everybody who makes it happen. Yeah, so.
Dr.
It's my
Benante?
turn. Yeah, just circling back to the exemptions, I certainly, as I said before, take the time to reflect to see. I think some of it is expected. There's going to be some level of discourse on a matter like this, but I respect the board's thoughts too about the timeline, because I think that came up last meeting and it came up today, and feeling like we got to make a decision. It's the 11th hour. It's not the best time in the 11th hour to have a substantive dialogue about something, and there was clearly information that was available, maybe not through the formal means that we would normally pursue, but my note here is I could have offered an opportunity to meet with the local companies and just talked a little bit about what we were considering, and information that they could have shared with us that never happened, and that could have. So we'll continue to reflect as well, just to make sure that it's our responsibility to make sure that the board is in the best position to act in an informed manner on any resolution or item that comes before you. So we'll be sure to, me, and our team will be sure to review it through that lens. So you can have what you need. And then I just wanted to thank Christine. I don't know if I was on the side before, so I don't think I got to thank you, but I want to highlight the data story. I forgot how you framed it. A student story through data. It's 10 o'clock. Well, so a small thing though.
It was really good.
It came up in the meeting, and we were talking. I said, Christine, maybe for your board report, it wouldn't be a bad idea to, or maybe it would be a good idea to go through it in this manner. And it's not just that, but I appreciate about Christine is that was it. She took that information and made it happen. I think represented it in a way that really illustrates the work of your team at the building that's going on. So I'm really appreciative of that. I think you did a great job.
And I hope we said that. I think we expressed our thanks. Okay, good. All right.
I feel appreciated.
Okay, good. It was certainly meant to be that. Okay, so I am going to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you to
Thank you,
everyone.
Peggy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Meg.